Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Narito po ako muli, si Peter Serrano para sa Pilipinas, Attitude Pa? An original programming brought to you by 3PM. Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, Pilipinas muna. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. This past few episodes po, ladies and gentlemen, we have been doing a series about educating ourselves. All of us, we are educating ourselves regarding the terrorist insurgency brought about by the terrorism of CPP, NPA, NDF. Bakit po namin sinusunod-sunod ito? Sapagkat gusto po naming maintindihan nating lahat, including myself, because I really want to educate myself with how things are around me and how this insurgency is affecting our country, our family, our government, and our youth especially. Marami na pong pagkakataon na nakita natin dito sa programa na nakakausap tayo ng mga dating nasa kilusan ng CPP-NPA, mga kadre kagaya ni Ka Eric at ni Ka Amihan, at sinabi nila sa atin kung ano ang pamumuhay na meron doon. Nakausap din natin ang mga magulang ng mga ninakawan na mga anak at ang mga anak na nasira ang kinabukasan na ikwento sa atin ng kanilang mga magulang. Nakausap din natin ang mga kinauukulan kagaya ni Undersecretary Lorraine Badoy at ni Attorney Marlo ng NTF-LCAC, at sinabi nila ang mga plano ng gobyerno kung paano wawakasan ang insurgency na ito. Kung paano tayo bilang mga mamamayan na makakatulong sa pagtatapos ng malaking problema ng ating bansang ito, ang CPP, NPA, and NDF. Recently, ang legal front ng CPP, NPA, ang NDF, the National Democratic Front, ay idineklara na rin ng ating Pangulo na terorista. Freeze ang kanilang accounts. Kumbaga, the government is making it hard for them to move freely as they used to. Ngayon, ang Executive Order number 70, kung inyo pong i-google, EO number 70, hinihikayat po ng gobyerno na makiisa tayo mga mamamayan, sa pagsugpo ng malaking problemang ito ng ating bansa, ang CPP, NPA, NDF. At sa executive order na yan, nagtayo din sila ng mga programa na makabubuti para sa ating mga mamamayan, kagaya ng barangay development. At diyan po ini-educate nila ang mga tao sa mga malalayong lugar. Imagine, all those people who used to be the enemy of the government are the ones talking about how to help the government fight this insurgency. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, malapit po sa puso ko ang ating episode dahil ang ating panauhin ay isang napakatapang na nilalang. Isa po siyang anak ng napakataas na posisyon na opisyal ng CPP-NPA. Both her father and her mother. If you would read her book, Crossing the Red Line, ito po ang kanyang libro, napaka-compelling po ng, ng librong ito. These are the truth behind being a child of a notorious terrorist. Not just one, not just one of her parents, but both her parents and one of her titas were members, high-ranking members of the CPP-NPA. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome journalist, author, and a very, very brave soul, I would call her, and the one who's lived in terror every day for more than a decade of her life. Please welcome on 3 p.m. Miss Drei Toledo.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me join your program this evening in Manila. And I am actually very happy, despite the challenges that our government is facing. I am happy with the development, with the progress that we are making, considering that we are battling with a 52, nearly 53-year-old communist terrorist insurgency throughout the country. I'm very happy to be here with you, and it's been a long time since we last
I
recorded.
know. The last time I saw you was when you guested in our show, yung show namin ni Vivian. Kasama
Yes,
mo pa si Rocky that time.
Rocky. Yes, yes.
Yeah, kayo dalawa ni Rocky. That was the last time I saw you. And the last time we talked was, we na-message naman sometimes, was when I got your book. Because
Yes,
nakita ko to posted by one of our friends, uh, one of our friends on Facebook, pinost niya ang libro mo, and I got very intrigued because I actually didn't know what happened to you, what transpired in your life, but,
mm,
but I see your posts na kiniklaim mo nga how you lived a life of terror. And that's why I must say, Dre, this book should be purchased by all parents, and they have to really make their children read this book. Kung mayaman lang ako, bibiling ko lahat ng kopya nito, papamigay ko sa lahat ng public school sa buong Pilipinas. I think the government should do that. We should compel the government to do that because this is a highly compelling and highly educational book. Not the education that you will get from school, but something that all the children, especially the far-flung areas of our country, should have. Now, speaking of your book, Dre, ang tapang, I can never imagine what 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 was in your mind writing all these words na nandito sa libro mo. Dre, hindi ko masasabing inspired, but what drove you to
mm.
write the book?
Well, you know, Peter, we were friends even before I was able to have the book come out, and
Mhm.
obviously, I did not talk openly about the background of my family and many of the acquaintances that I had in my circle, um, who were not with the CPP, NPA, and DF were shocked, and those who were with the CPP, NPA, and DF, they, you know, felt that I was crazy to go up against my dad because he's really a notorious killer. He's responsible for, if you are aware, with Campanyang Ahos. So these are the purges, the internal purges, wherein the CPP, NPA, and DF, purged their own members, who were accused of having betrayed the Communist Party.
Mhm.
And this was running from the 1980s, 1990s onwards, even until this very day, the internal purges of the CPP-NPA NDF continue. And the reason I was, in a way, catapulted to writing this book, when obviously I had kept my silence. I never um, even condemned my parents publicly about all the things that I suffered. And it's typical of a child, never mind that I'm a child of communist terrorists, but it's very typical of a child who is abused, by parents, to keep a facade of like a mask. You put a mask on and you want to speak nicely about, the people who are abusing you. It's part of gaslighting. It's part of what's called Stockholm syndrome. The
Mm-hmm.
way that the victims of abuse, they have this difficulty, right, before processing. So for me, I underwent processing with a professional psychotherapist for over a decade, and even that was not sufficient to push me, to condemn my parents. I was undergoing therapy since 2007 and 2008. Um, and as you've read in the book, that was also the time that I was poisoned by my dad.
Yeah.
And even then, you keep quiet because death is just there. If you dare to go a step further to condemn them publicly, you will be killed. So you keep quiet. You say nice things about them, and you try to just in a way coexist with the evil that you grew up with, and you try to separate yourself, as possible, as much as possible. You try to separate yourself away from the toxicity, away from the violence. But the problem about being born into a family, I mean, it's not just my parents, it's the clan. It's
Mm-hmm.
the entire clan of my father's side, and more than 80% of the clan of my mother's side. So we're talking about growing up in an environment where it's hard to seek help, because
Yeah.
if I talk to somebody, it's hard to get even the normal human sympathy, that if you are being
Yes.
abused, that
Yes.
you would get sympathy from family members. That was very difficult, and I would say that, like, on my mother's side, um, the I was supported by my mom's non-NPA sister, the youngest one,
Mm.
who is closest to their dad. So this was the only sister that the CPP-NPA NDF was not able to get, although they attempted, but they failed to
Yeah.
get this aunt of mine, for the very reason that she's a sincerely devout, sincerely religious person. So it was, practically impossible to turn her into an operative like my mom, like her other sisters. And so what happened was, imagine growing up and I was accustomed to the fact that my father was a killer, my grandfather was a bomber, and of course after my grandfather was with the Hukbalahap. Hukbalahap is, for the other Filipinos, a lot, they know Hukbalahap, but they don't know that Hukbalahap was the armed wing of the first Communist Party of the Philippines, PKP 1930, Partido ng
Mm-hmm.
Komunista ng Pilipinas. So PKP 1930 was aligned with Moscow, and its armed wing was Hukbalahap. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, in schools, diba, we are taught about Hukbalahap, but we are not taught that Hukbalahap was actually a communist guerrilla movement. It
Yes.
was an armed wing of the PKP 1930. So my grandfather was a part of that before he survived the Bataan Death March. And when he survived the Bataan Death March, naturally, kinuha siya ng US Air Force because he was a very good bomber.
Mm-hmm.
He's also an inventor. He's a brilliant man. But during the generation of my grandfather, they were not killing like fellow Filipinos. I have to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
emphasize that. In the beginning of the Hukbalahap, they were protecting the women, they were protecting the children from being raped by members of the Japanese army, diba, during the
So if
occupation.
we're going to talk about the hukbalahap, mas noble ang cause ng hukbalahap, hindi ba?
Um,
Kasi
in the beginning,
pumoprotekto sila ng mga
yes,
in the
yes,
beginning. Okay.
in the beginning, I would like to emphasize na it's all in the beginning, because
Mm-hmm.
and this is
Mm-hmm.
something that I would like to emphasize to our audience, It's that
Mhm.
any armed group without the military doctrine, without the training, without the proper discipline of the military, if you arm, for example, the Hukbalahap, you arm them, no? So they were useful during the occupation. Now the problem is there's a certain level of addiction that goes with killing, that goes with, like you don't know who are you gonna kill next. Pag
Mhm.
nawala na yung kalaban mo, there's a power vacuum. Sino na yung next mong kakalabanin? So that's when there's a certain mutation na
Okay.
nag-occur in any armed group. Na, for example, sa Hukbalahap, ano? So, in the beginning, during the time of my grandfather, it was a noble movement because they were
Yeah.
protecting women, they were protecting children. And then, of course, nung na-recognize na yung independence ng Philippines during the,
Mhm.
di ba, in the process of the yung 19, ano natin, 30 na PKP, kinalimutan na siya ng Pilipinas kasi tinanggal
Mhm.
na ng mga CPP-NPA, NDF, katulad ni Joe Masison.
Mhm.
Nung nag-splinter sila from PKP 1930, kasi tinanggal ng Lava Brothers, di ba? Tinanggal nung Lava Brothers, kumbaga, kung sa Pinoy Big Brother, voted out. Itong si Joe Masison from the
Okay,
PKP
okay.
1930. But he was young, at the time when he was booted
Uh-huh.
out because nag-away kasi during the Cold War era, nag-away ang mismong Moscow, yung USSR, with the Chinese Communist Party. So
Okay.
nag-splinter lahat ng Chinese Communist Party at saka yung Moscow Communist Party na aligned na mga
Mhm.
different communist parties around the world. Nag-splinter sila, nag-faction.
Mhm.
May mga nag-side sa Moscow, may mga nag-side sa China, no? So itong si Joe Machison sa Philippines, at the time, he sided with Moscow.
Okay.
Sorry, he sided with China, and then ang Lava
China.
Brothers stayed. The Lava Brothers stayed with the Moscow Alliance, no, yung USSR Alliance. So syempre, nagkagulo nun no, and so naging successful yung overtake ng power ni Joma Sison. Kasi as you know, most Filipinos today, hindi na nila alam ano yung PKP 1930. Di ba?
Mhm.
Karamihan ng Pilipino, ang alam nila, pag pinag-usapan natin communist terrorist insurgency, ang karamihan sa kanila, ang alam nila, nagsimula ito ng CPP, di ba?
Mhm.
53 years ago. Yan ang yung common knowledge, no, ng karamihan ng
Mhm.
mga tao. And officially, when we look at mainstream media, even our government na publications, talagang we stick to the 53 years because yan yung
53
CPP,
years.
NPA, NDF. Oo. Pero kung isasama mo yung PKP 1930, no? Kung isasama mo yung Partido Komunista ng Pilipinas at yung Hukbalahap, it's actually 91 years. So I'm
Mm.
giving this context para maintindihan ng mga tao gaano na ba talaga siya katagal? Because
Yeah, yeah.
before
Ako, Drei,
PKP,
ngayon ko lang din narinig yan ha. Because I'm quite ignorant with how the communism flourished in the country.
uh,
Because like a lot of people, I was ignorant with how it was. Alam mo yung kami yung mga tao na so long as okay kami, wala kaming pakialam. Alam mo yung gano'n? I was
yes,
part of that.
yes,
I was part of that. And then
mm-mm,
when this administration took over, suddenly things are beginning to get clear in my mind, at least in my mind. And then nakikita na namin. That's why me and my friends, you've met Emil. You've met
mm-mm,
Emil. He's one of our executive producers. We decided to come up with this channel because we really want to educate ourselves with our audience to how things really happen.
mm-mm,
So thank you, Jay, for that history that you're
mm-mm,
telling us right now with how the
mm-mm,
communism flourished in the country. You may continue.
yes.
Mhm.
It's Emil is pointing out that also that most people actually have the impression that the New People's Army started during the time of President Marcos. This is
Mhm.
patently false because the PKP 1930, as the name shows it started the communist movement in the Philippines started in 1930. That's why it's called
Mhm.
PKP 1930. Okay, and the Lava Brothers, back then who were the founders. They were the chairman of the PKP 1930 at mas senior sila kay Joe Masison. Sila, they at the time aligned kasi sila sa USSR, aligned sila sa Moscow. So there was a time that ano sila, kumbaga may mga attempts ng peace talks time pa ni President Rojas. Okay? So ayan alam naman natin na ang problema diyan, most Filipinos because of the way that our books are written, because of the way that the Department of Education has been infiltrated deeply by the Communist Party of the Philippines. And I can say this, and I have been saying this many times, because I served in the Department of Education as a consultant, and I have seen that the people that I work with, majority, not all, but majority, especially the high-ranking ones, yung talagang may impact yung decisions, no, internally. Sino yung mga magsusulat ng libro, yung mga textbooks, ano yung lalabas ng mga textbooks, lahat yan hawak ng Communist Party. And it has been the case for the last 30 years. So, kumbaga ngayon pa lang tayo lumalaban, kung 30 years na, yung in the 53 years ng CPP, hindi naman sila kaagad malakas, di ba? They were being supported by the Chinese Communist Party, pero hindi pa sila ganun kalakas. They were still taking off kasi at the time, bata pa si Joe Masison, he was getting his financial support from at the time Senator Ninoy Aquino. Now, the support that he has been getting for our audiences, pwede nyo na pong ma-access sa mga CIA na websites yung declassified information tungkol sa pag-support ni Senator Ninoy Aquino doon mismo sa ating kumbaga sa akala natin parang out of nowhere biglang nagkaroon ng funding ang isang professor, Joe Masison. He was a professor, no? He just as Professor Nur Miswari was also a simple professor. So you have to ask yourself the logical question. For every terrorism attack, there has to be sufficient funding. Diba? Hindi yan manggagaling out of nowhere without financial resources. Because for every bomb that gets assembled, for every AK-47 that gets purchased, or an RPG that is used to, blow up a plane, and all these things require funding. And though the funding might be considerably less kasi mas mura yung mga parts pag bibilhin mo siya sa Asia, kung galing siya sa China, kung galing siya sa neighboring countries sa Southeast Asia, mas mura mag-assemble ng bomba, no? And ang sa akin kasi lumaki ako na I wasn't aware, just as you're saying, you're telling me, Peter, na parang may mga things na hindi ka aware and that ngayon ka lang nagising. And ang contrast naman nun, Peter, is that for me, I thought everybody knew.
Yeah.
You when I was growing up, that's the contrast. I thought everybody knew. Kasi yung may question dito, blatant revisionism in history about Ninoy is a fact. Yes, kailangan po kasi, pag titingnan natin yung history, kailangan may corroboration po yan. No? Hindi pwede na mayroon kang history books. For example, kesyo yun yung pinublish ng DepEd for the last 30 years. Na ibig sabihin, totoo na yun. Kasi hindi rin po pwede magsinungaling yung nagtatransmit ng information sa US Embassy papunta ng Washington. So kung meron po silang mga tinransmit na ngayon po ay declassified information na tungkol sa financial support that was provided by Senator Ninoy Aquino to both Nur Miswari and also to Joe Masison, to start both the communist terrorist insurgency and the religious extremist na factions, no? Kasi ang goal noon, and we have been saying this time and again, is that ang goal noon ni Senator Ninoy Aquino, he wanted to become president. At what cost? He was selling Saba, di ba? It was at the expense of, imagine, if we understand how much Saba produces, it produces billions. It's just a small island if you think about it, but it has a lot of oil. And that's why during the time of President Marcos, and it wasn't only President Marcos, time pa ni President Macapagal, Diosdado Macapagal, kiniklaim na natin yung rights natin doon sa Sabah because of the oil na meron naman talaga doon. And syempre, ano to you are dealing with the devil. The moment that you want to become, ang dream kasi ni Senator Dinoy Aquino was to become president. And he was so ambitious that he was willing to sell a part of the Philippines. Siguro sa mind niya at the time, ang daming resources ng Philippines. So, anong value ng isang lugar?
Isla,
no? Like Sabah. Ano bang value niyan? Para ganun siguro yung mindset niya, no? Kasi syempre, if you think about it, magiging reflection lang naman ng mindset niya in terms of how he thinks of Sabah, kung paano nila hinahandle yung Hacienda Luisita. Because you cannot treat a bigger subject na yung smaller domain na meron kang control. Makikita mo naman, wala naman silang concept of human rights. Ang mga Juanco Aquino, wala silang concept of treating the farmers fairly, justly, giving them their share. Wala naman silang ganon. Anything that they can pull off with power, with connection, yun yung gagawin nila. Kasi di ba naka-loan lang sa kanila yung Hacienda Luisita. It was leased to them by Land Bank. It was not really their property to begin with. It was leased to them. Tapos nung tapos na, dapat expired na yung lease, hindi nila binalik sa Philippine government.
Hindi nila binalik.
Yes. And for a lot of Filipinos na hindi pa nakakapunta ng Hacienda Luisita or they're just familiar with the place, no, called Hacienda Luisita in Tarlac, you just have to imagine it's the size of combining Manila and something like Ortigas. Ipagsama mo yung dalawang cities ng Manila at saka Ortigas, that is the size. Yes. We're not talking of like, your regular koprahan or hacienda that might be like half of a city or, like a third of a city. We're talking about two big cities combined. That is the size of Hacienda Luisita. So, just going back, dun sa point ko kanina, Peter, na akala ko, yung alam ko, alam ng lahat. It was not, it never occurred to me. Di ba ganun yun Kung ano yung alam mo, you assume that others know it.
Everybody knows the same thing as well.
Yes. So, hindi nag-occur sa akin na Filipinos are not aware about how the CPP-NPA and NDF operate. Hindi yun ang first na default understanding ko, no?
Yeah.
Kasi ako,
Drei, I would just like, pardon me, I would just like, for the sake of our audience watching, si Drei po grew up, as I've said kanina, with parents na CPP-NPA, both the mom and dad. At hindi lang po sila miyembro ng CPP-NPA, matataas po ang posisyon ng parents ni Drei sa CPP-NPA, including her tita. So Drei grew up in that kind of environment, just for the sake of our audience, so they would know your history more. Drei, go on.
Yes. So di ba kanina, Peter, you asked like what was it that catapulted me into coming out, into crossing the red line,
writing the book,
and why did I do this, knowing that my life would be in danger?
Yes.
Well, first of all, at the time, nung time pa ng 2016, nung di ba nag-hangout tayo. At the time, I was already living away from my family, from my parents, from my most of my relatives. Like I cut off na ako sa kanila for the last from 2013 to 2016 nung nakita tayo. Hindi ko na sila nakikita. And so this is the kind of relationship na estranged na ako. I just receive calls every now and then from my mother kapag yung may sakit siya, may kailangan siya. I receive calls from her. But I have blocked my dad. I have blocked, the other toxic CPP relatives that, it was so difficult for me because if you could only understand na from the time that I was poisoned in 2007, 2008, Peter, wala akong tatakbuhang gobyerno. Kanino ako tatakbo? Diba? If I need help, who do I ask help from? Hindi naman sila officially designated terrorist organization. Diba? sino ang tutulong sa akin? Sino ang sasaklolo? Wala. And a lot of
Wala.
people are trapped in the same situation that I was trapped in. Na hindi ako CPP, pamilya ko CPP-NPA, pero ako hindi ako CPP-NPA. Diba? And even if I want to get away from them, they make it impossible kasi grabe ang network nila. Yung
Yeah.
sinasabi ng mga tao na ang dami nila, na nakapaligid sila, totoo yun. And I have experienced that because, growing up, I was thinking, and ganito ka na-distort yung mindset ko when I was little, no? I believed that my father was right in killing everybody he killed. Hindi ako nag-question, Peter. Lumaki
Mm-mm.
ako thinking that just as, di ba, my grandfather who was malahap, just as he was
Mm-mm.
justified in bombing, and in every bombing, my grandfather would kill dozens, no? So killing by the dozen yan pagka bomba, di ba? And kung mas malaking bomba, so killing by the hundred, di ba? So
Mm-mm.
lumaki ako na ang mindset ko, there's a justification for killing. Na
For
hindi
killing.
lahat ng, yes, and I grew up na ganyan ang mindset ko. So, ang mindset ko noon na kung ginawa ng lolo ko may justification, I was thinking that my father also had his justification. Na hindi naman siguro papatayin ng papa ko yung mga tao na pinatay niya kung wala silang ginawa na pagtraidor sa Communist Party. Ganun ako mag-isip at the time. And
Mm-mm.
I was thinking that this was not like because my father was a murderer per se, but
Yeah,
because he
yeah.
was fighting for a cause that he truly believed in since he was 12 years old. So, mahirap kasi baguhin yung mindset. Like, ang mother ko, yung mga kapatid niya, Manobo. Yung father ko is of Chinese descent. So, yung difficulty dito, Peter, is that ang difference lang is that my mother came from a very impoverished na Manobo background. So ito yung
Yeah.
mga Manobo warriors na magaling sa blade, magaling sa espada, magaling sa baril, madaling turuan because the Manobos
Mm-mm.
as a tribe, maraming warriors ang Manobos. Kaya parati mapapansin mo tuwing may mga armed groups, kumukuha sila sa tribo namin. Bakit sila
Mm-mm.
kumukuha sa tribo namin? Kasi merong long history yung tribo namin, just like the Tausug, 'di ba? Meron silang warrior na tribe. O just like yung mga
Mm-mm.
Ifugao, meron silang mga warrior tribes, 'di ba? Na ito yung mga tribes na sanay pumatay because it's part of
Mm-mm.
the culture na
Culture.
warriors talaga yung lalaki ka, bata ka pa lang, marunong ka na gumamit ng mga weapons. So, hindi kasi siya, syempre ngayon lang naman in our generation, yung to talk about children's rights, to talk about human rights. These are all
Mm-mm.
fairly recent, fairly modern agreements, di ba? After the World War One, after the World War Two, we already have agreed upon a set of human rights, a set of children's rights. Pero even
Mm-mm.
in the tribal setting, no, hindi pa yan fully adapted. So,
Yes.
yung naging problema is that my mom and her sisters, so ang problema niya dahil Manobo. So, kahit teacher na yung mama nila tsaka yung papa nila, ito yung mga teacher nung panahon ng World War II na, alam mo yung grade school lang yung natapos nila or high school lang yung
Yes,
natapos nila.
yes.
Tapos ang ginawa ni President Marcos, minas education ng master's degree, lahat magagawin niyang
Yes.
principal, yung mga
Oo, oo.
'di ba? Kasi nagkagera eh. So, ang daming kailangang i-educate. So, kahit grade school or high school lang ang
Yeah, I
natapos mo,
remember kasi
ginagawa ka.
my mom, after the war, after World War II, my mom finished her college and she was done studying at the age of 26 because
Yes.
she was 14 when the war happened and she was 18, almost 19 when the war ended, nung na-liberate ang
Mm,
Pilipinas from
mm,
World War II. So she studied siyempre slowly because she was also trying to recover the family's losses. Kasi si mama ang para naging breadwinner ng pamilya niya when the war ended because tumanda na yung mga magulang eh. So yeah, I understand what
mm.
you're saying that mass education happened during that time.
Yes. So, ang situation nito, if you can just imagine, So we are from Mindanao, yung mga manobo ng Camiguin, manobo ng Hinuog City. At the time, talagang hindi yan na-educate, no? So my grandfather, the father of my mom, actually pro-Marcos siya. Bakit? Kasi, kaya siya pro-Marcos kasi it was the first time na from when the war broke out, it was the first time na na-feel niya yung governance. Na na-feel niya na yung national government cared about the IPs, yung mga manobo ng Hinuog. Kasi ginawa nilang principal yung lolo ko, tapos teacher yung lola ko. So, ano yung, and I'm explaining na kahit doon sa mga educated na manobo. Ito yung reason why I'm explaining this part, no? Kahit sa mga educated na manobo, nandun yung top recruiters ng CPP-NPA, NDF kasi inaabangan nila yung mga bata katulad ng mama ko, yung mga kapatid niya, inaabangan nila. So dati kasi merong every year, no, merong Jerry Rojas Award para sa mga graduating class. Yung Jerry Rojas Award, sa Hinuog City, no, yun ang ginagamit nila na gauge na may potential tong bata to na maging top cadre. Kahit manobo siya, kung anumang tribo siya galing, kahit mahirap.
Kumbaga, pino-profile na nila, Drei, no?
Pino-profile na nila
yung mga bata.
Oo, may profiling yon. Kasi ang situation nito, Peter, hindi naman nangyari na ang lola ko at lolo ko ginusto nila na maging NPA yung mama ko, yung mga kapatid niya na babae. Siyempre hindi, kasi 7 sila magkakapatid eh. Imagine mo na makuha ng CPP-NPA yung 4. Tapos, di ba, yung 3 bunso na hindi na nakuha ng CPP-NPA yung bunso kasi yun yung sobrang, alam mo yung binibaby na ng parents, malapit na masyado sa parents, so hindi na nakuha. Pero yung 4 na babae, nakuha ng CPP-NPA. And paano nangyari yun? They were able
kasi,
to get
Drei,
my
in your book, ang napapansin ko sa libro mo, you have mentioned religion so many times. You have mentioned religion so many times. And what's so staggering about it was, doon, yun ang ginagamit sa recruitment. They use religion. They use the belief, they use the Bible, they use the Quran and everything, and all the religious literature that you have placed in your books to attract people. And I have read in your book that your titas and your mom was actually being honed by the religion of Virgin Mary, RVM nuns. Nonetheless, right?
The RVM, Religious of the Virgin Mary.
Oo.
So yung RVM nuns kasi at saka yung Jesuits, no? Kasi yung Christ the King College in Hinuog City was actually set up by Jesuit priests, no?
Yes.
Ang problema, ito yung mga Jesuit priests na communist termites. Hindi lahat ng Jesuit priests are communist termites, pero marami sa mga na-assign in the Philippines back in the day were communist termites. Na ang nag-propagate nun, Peter, was USSR. Kasi yung model ng paggamit ng religion is a specific program that came from the USSR, from the Moscow na Communist Party during the time pa of Stalin. Nandiyan na yung program na yan. Yung program kasi, di ba, all over the world, maraming countries na very religious, very God-fearing. Like the Philippines,
especially
no?
Yeah.
Oo. So, paano mo ipapasok ang isang ideology, like communism, in countries, especially na may kultura na God-fearing, di ba? Hindi mo siya maipapasok kasi kumbaga antithesis niya ng communism ang pagiging God-fearing, di ba?
Yeah.
Kasi dapat atheist ka, dapat hindi ka naniniwala kay God, dapat hindi ka naniniwala sa supreme being, sa lahat ng religious laws, di ba? That God-fearing people abide by, no?
Yeah.
Or strive to live according to the laws of God and the laws of the religion they embrace. So, syempre, ang nangyayari ngayon dyan, yung resistance na yan, ang strategy ng USSR back in the day, ang strategy nila was to make use of religious organizations. I-infiltrate nila, papasukin nila, tapos i-twist nila yung mga teachings to slowly lead the followers. So meron ka ng ano, 'di ba, yung tinatawag nga nila na religion is the opium of the masses. Yan ang parating sinasabi ni
Yes,
Marx,
yes.
ng sinasabi ng mga followers ng communism. So for them, para ma-capture nila, kumbaga may ready, ano ka na may ready flock ka na. Ang
Oo.
gagawin mo
May
na lang,
ready market ka na, kumbaga.
oh, may ready market ka, iti-tweak mo na lang. Yung, kumbaga,
Mm-mm.
iti-tweak mo yung teachings. So, para sumunod sila sa'yo, magkunwari kang madre, magkunwari kang pare, magkunwari kang imam, magkunwari kang bahay na leader, magkunwari ka na monk, magkunwari ka. So, kasi ito one of the things that I also noticed in the Philippines is that marami sa ating mga Muslim brothers and sisters are actually devout Muslims, Peter. They're devout Muslims.
Mm-mm.
They don't like violence. But
Yeah.
here's the thing that I observed growing up. Ang mga nag-a-attack, yung mga talagang nagbumobomba in the name of, sasabihin nila dahil sa Islam, actually may link sila sa CPP-NPA, NDF, which makes me ask, are they sincere? You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't think they're real Muslims. Because Muslims, in essence, they are followers of a religion of peace. They don't like violence
Yes,
also,
peace
'di ba?
loving ang mga Muslims. Yeah.
Yes. Oo. So doon ko na nung nag-cover nga ako sa Marawi Siege, doon ko nakausap yung ibang mga nag-surrender na ng mga commander ng MILF na may
Oo.
iba MNLF, nagalit sila sa Abu Sayyaf, galit sila sa MNLF, galit din sila sa MILF, pero mga former commanders sila, no? Sabi nila, ang kinagagalit nila, nakita nila na grabe ang pag-control ng CPP-NPA, NDF. Even doon sa mga MNLF, kahit doon sa MILF, merong mga CPP-NPA na sumisira. So for example, ang gusto lang nila autonomy. Tapos kailangan for example, yung mga Muslim brothers and sisters nila, pinamisan sila nung time to ni before President Duterte, so different administrations, pero if every time na merong parang version ng e-clip, no? Pero para sa ating mga MILF, MNLF surrenderers, hindi talaga nabigay sa kanila yung mga pabahay, hindi nabigay sa kanila yung livelihood, nag-picture taking lang. Etong mga CPP, NPA, NDF na nakaupo sa gobyerno, tapos at the time, supposedly sila yung magpa-facilitate na yung mga nag-surrender na MILF at saka na batalyon. So we have like 400 na MILF, no? Nag-surrender sila balik sa gobyerno.
400?
Yes, 400. Tapos, 200 niyan nakuha ng ISIS during the Marawi Siege. Kasi hindi sila tinulungan ng yung previous administration, merong mga pinramis na bahay, pinramis na livelihood, na hindi nila nakuha. Nung kinausap ko yung commander, sabi ko, paano po, ano po bang nangyari? Sabi niya, ma'am, kasi mga CPP yung mga nakaupo sa gobyerno. Kaya yung mga Muslim, hindi nila gustong tulungan. So, ito yung reality na just to be fair, na sometimes yung tinitingnan natin, ginajudge natin na religious extremist, actually misunderstood din sila. Meron din, alam mo yung merong mga negotiations, meron silang mga pinaglalaban na hindi, dahil na, kumaga lost in translation na, dahil alam mo yon, ang layo nila, nasa Mindanao sila, tapos hindi naman sila kina-cover ng mainstream media. So, hindi nila nako-communicate yung bakit ba sila galit. Diba?
Yes,
ano ba yung mga ninakaw na pondo? Kasi yung ganun yung sa mga...
Dapat para sa kanila.
Oo, nagdapat sa kanila. Kaya sila pumapatay. Kaya sila, yung, alam mo yung pag out of hunger, yung talagang grabing deprivation, grabing, yung, doon mo makikita na kahit ngayon, ang tanong ng itong mga surrenderers na to ng MILF, ang tanong nila, ma'am, bakit kami? Wala kaming e-clip. Bakit pag komunista meron? Bakit kami wala? Nung past administrations, ninakaw ng mga nakaupo sa gobyerno in the past administrations bago si President Duterte, ninakaw. So, kumbaga, nag-surrender sila kaso lang in the past administration kasi sila nag-surrender. Diba? So, sabi nila, paano na lang kami, ma'am? Diba? So, nakikita nila na pag CPP, binibigyan ng opportunity na mag-surrender, may e-clip, may housing, ganito, ganyan. Ang tanong nila, bakit kami, is it because we are Muslims? Di ba, legit yan na question. It's a
Yeah,
very good
yeah.
question. It's a fair question that needs to be answered. Kasi kung halimbawa, ninakaw ng previous administration, syempre, part yan ng minamana na problema ng current administration. Kailangan
Yes, yes.
sagutin pa rin natin, no, ng current administration natin at saka yung 2022, kung sino yung next president natin, kailangan tulungan din natin yung Muslim brothers and sisters natin. Kasi meron
Yes,
silang
yes.
mga legitimate plight na, alam mo, yung sinisira ng communist yung narrative. Sinisira nila yung, ano ba yung
Yeah.
pinaglalaban ng mga Muslim brothers and sisters natin. And ang sa akin is that very important yung naging role ng creation ng National Task Force to End the Local Communist Armed Conflict, no, yung NTFL-CAC.
Yeah.
Sobrang
NTFL-CAC.
importante yung NTFL-CAC, sobrang importante na ma-continue ito, hindi ito dapat i-dissolve ng basta-basta, kailangan i-continue ito in the next administration. Kailangan bumoto tayo ng administration na i-continue yung NTFL-CAC. Bakit?
Yes.
Kasi pag hindi na-continue yung NTFL-CAC, maraming mamamatay, Peter. Maraming mamamatay among those sa mga katulad ko na lumalaban na, 'di ba? Lahat ng mga yung mga nag-testify na sa Senate hearing, 'di ba? Yung mga nag-surrender na sa
Nagbalik loob
government.
na sa gobyerno.
Nagbalik loob na. Kailangan for at least another kung ako ang tatanungin another 30 years. Kailangan ng NTFL-CAC. Hindi natin ito pwedeng gawing government
Drei, meron lang ako
na agency.
Oo.
Yes, Peter.
Yeah. Yeah, meron lang ako nabasa dito, no, the latter part of your book, where it was said na ang sabi ng yung father na mas madali mag-recruit ng mga baguhan. Madali silang i-radicalize kasi all we have to do is tell them na ito ang ating pinaglalaban, ito ang ideology na tama, ito, tapos dadali nila sa rally at doon sa rally, yung mga senior members ng NPA, pagdadamitin nila ng militar o kaya pulis, tapos sisiguraduhin nila na may mapipilay o mamamatay doon sa mga kagrupo ng mga baguhan. So that,
and then they get radicalized.
Mararadicalize sila because nakita nila kung paano ang treatment sa kanilang kasamahan. Madali nga naman kung i-stage mo yung ganong klaseng radicalization na nangyayari sa mga kapatid nating Muslim. Yan din ang strategy na ginagawa nila. Diba? Which you call gaslighting. Right?
Yes. Ang ano kasi nito, alam mo, Peter, ang reality nito, marami ng mga matatapang na lumabas, no? So, I came out with a book, and then you also have very sincere na mga nagbalik loob. Like, for example, ako sa mga nakikita ko, isa sa mga sincere is si Kaamihan.
Yes, I had her in the show.
Nakita ko yung testimony niya. And I can, for me, I will vouch na nakikita ko sincere siya. Kasi meron din ako mga nakikita na hindi sincere. May mga nakikita ako na communist termites. Nagkukunwari silang surrenderers. Tapos nakikita ko na minimisdirect nila yung government. May mga sinasabi silang mali. May mga sinasabi silang hindi totoo. Or expired na yung information. Pero nakita ko si Kaamihan is sincere. No? And yung mga ganito, sincere na allies natin, kailangan matuloy-tuloy ang NTFL-CAC. Kailangan for the next 3, 4, 5 administrations, ituloy-tuloy natin ito. Kasi hindi lang ako ang nag-iisang bata, Peter, na ganito ang naging situation. Yung reality na kinagisnan ko, actually, swerte lang ako, Peter. Kasi, kumbaga, yung capacity, yung mental capacity na kaya kong magtrabaho since I was 17 years old.
Yes.
Tapos, full-time job na ako at 17. Nag-aaral pa ako sa UP Diliman. Tapos, alam mo yung confusion ko na bakit lahat ng CPP-NPA, NDF sa UP Diliman, gusto akong gawing chairman. Pipili lang ako kung gagawin akong chairman sa Stand UP, gagawin akong chairman sa Gabriela. Pinapapili lang ako. So, hindi ko get, no? Like at the time, bakit ganun ang treatment? Maraming mga anak ng mga communist terrorist leaders na high-ranking, hindi nila nararamdaman na kinukuha na sila. Kasi ang style kasi ng CPP-NPA, NDF, Peter, meron yan silang network na hindi sila nag-acknowledge na magkakakilala sila. Like for example, yung kumukuha sa akin in UP Diliman na professor, when my mother was tortured and murdered.
Na professor?
Yes, professor. Yes, professor sa UP Diliman. Very prominent ito na professor, no, na CPP-NPA, NDF sa UP Diliman. But when my mother was tortured and murdered by my dad, kasi gusto mang umalis ng mama ko sa CPP-NPA, di ba?
Yes,
so ito yung naging driving factor for me. Na kung yung nanay ko nga, na sobrang pinrotect niya yung dad ko for what? More than 40 years, pinrotect niya yung dad ko, di ba? And tapos kayang i-torture ng dad ko. So nakita ko na, okay, so hindi nagsa-stop. Yung, alam mo yung doon nabasag, yung sarili kong, merong, yung sinasabi ko sa'yo na yung mindset ko dati, na akala ko, pag may pinapatay yung papa ko, akala ko justified. Alam mo, nabasag yun, nung nakita ko na, ganun pala. So hindi, akala ko kaya mo lang ako tinatry patayin dahil nagsasalita ako, nanghihingi ako ng tulong. And I wasn't even publicly asking for help, Peter. The sexual abuse that I had to endure, for decades, and to keep that cloaked, to keep that discreet, na dahil meron akong pangalan na pinoprotektahan ko yung pangalan ng brother ko, yung pangalan ng nanay ko, alam mo yung, I was trying to resolve the issue, which I thought was family related. I thought the sexual abuse, I thought that was just a family issue that had to be resolved internally. I did not realize until later that the sexual abuse was part of radicalization. And that they were so frustrated, Peter, that I could not be radicalized. Yung, alam mo yung frustration nila na...
When I was reading your book, and when I got to that point where you were saying na because they weren't able to radicalize you, they were out to destroy you. To destroy your name, make sure that education will get fucked up, and the places of works that you will go to would be controlled by them, and everything of that, which was very, for me, as the reader, I was so overwhelmed by the information I was getting from your book. Drei, nung nangyayari sa'yo yun, I just want everybody to understand where you're coming from, bakit ka ganito kagalit sa iyong ama. Kasi makikita naman yan sa mga posts mo if people are following you. Ano ang tumatakbo sa utak mo nung ginaganong ka ng ama mo? You were molested, you were raped since you were basically an infant till you're a child, you're a teenager. Nagkaroon ka na ng selective amnesia and everything, that a psychotherapist had to tell you that this is what happened to you. Ano ang tumatakbo sa isip mo nun, Drei, nung ginaganong ka ng ama mo? Because I cannot imagine a father can do it to a child.
At the time, to be honest, I felt hatred. In the first few years, I felt hatred. And that's natural for all children that go through, a trauma like that. But then at the same time, it was so confusing because every time I confronted my dad, every time I confronted him about what he was doing, he would say it never happened.
Yeah.
He would say that it's just your imagination, it's just in your head, blah blah blah. So, it was.
But you're a bipolar, he said.
Yes, he was saying na baliw ako, bipolar daw, imagination ko lang yun. Tapos syempre hindi ko alam ano yung bipolar noon, no? So I didn't understand what it meant. And at the time, he started giving me drugs, no? Which hurt, nag-acute renal failure ako dahil doon sa drugs na hindi naman kasi ako bipolar. So pag walang i-correct yung gamot na meant for somebody na may mental illness, tapos wala siyang i-correct na hormones sa body, ang nangyayari, yung organs mo mag-fail. Yung organs
especially
mo
your liver and your kidney.
Yes, kasi wala siyang kinokorekt wala siyang ina-alter na chemical imbalance. So, ang nangyari sa akin, in-attack niya lang yung kidney ko, in-attack niya lang yung liver ko. And it was such a difficult time because even if sinabihan na dun sa ER, yung doctors na nag-attend sa akin, they wanted me to go to the police after I was discharged. But my mother went back to the Philippines, took me out of the hospital, and brought me abroad para hindi ako mag-file sa PNP. And we are talking about 2007, 2008 na ang scenario na to, if you could just imagine, it seems like a family problem. It didn't occur to me that they were protecting their reputation because they are still active operatives. It didn't occur to me back then. So I was quiet about it. And to be honest, Peter, I actually gave my father so many chances to apologize.
You did.
I really confronted.
You were just asking for an apology.
Yes, that was it. That was it. Ang sabi ko lang, I talked to him. I said, Papa, just apologize. Tell me why you did it. Were you on drugs? Were you, I don't know, were you drunk? What was it? What was going on inside your head? I just need for you to acknowledge what you did, to apologize, and I will forgive you. It was that simple. For me kasi, alam mo yun, for any child, mas masakit mag-cut ties than to just, give forgiveness. Mas madali to give forgiveness, sa totoo lang. And I have been wanting to give that forgiveness for so long. And a lot of people think na up to now that I hate my dad. I don't. I don't hate him. And I have to categorically state that. Now, the reason I'm fighting him is because I don't want him to go to hell for eternity. And if he has to face his punishment in this lifetime, na pananagutan niya, ang dami niya nang pinatay, hindi lang naman mama ko eh. Ang dami na niyang pinatay. Ang daming mga batang naulila, ang daming mga nawalan ng asawa, nawalan ng anak because of him. And people like him, people like si Kabilog, si Nakadante, do you see them suffer? None. Diba? Wala silang, si Kabilog nga, inarrest daw nung March 2020, tapos after one month lang, Peter, pinakawalan ng NDF lawyers. Alam mo magkano? 200,000 lang ang pinost niya na bail ni Kabilog. So imagine mo, mass murder, purge in Leyte, yun ang crime niya, tapos naka-bail siya for 200,000 pesos. So, ito yung mga reality na sinasabi ko na hindi madali lumaban. I understand that. And a lot of people think that, why would the daughter of a high-ranking leader fight back when I can actually be profiting from all the money, from all the revolutionary tax? Kung maluho ako na tao, Peter, kung wala akong prinsipyo, kung wala akong moral compass, I would just be CPP-NPA because CPP-NPA royalty ang family ko eh. Diba? I don't have to work for a single day of my life. I'll just have to kill occasionally for whoever sabihin ng papa ko, patayin mo to. Tapos, may pera na ako. Diba? So, ang reality is that is that the kind of life that I want for myself? No. Yeah. I don't want to be a killer like them. So, ang sa akin was, I was thinking na nung lahat ng nangyayari, lahat ng mga pinatay ng mama ko, ng papa ko, ng mga si Ka Jojo, no, yung auntie ko na si Ka Jojo. She was even featured in yung book ni Primitivo Mijares, di ba? So, yung dun sa conjugal dictatorship na book ni Primitivo Mijares, he featured the story of Ka Jojo, who's my aunt, si Perla Judy Sumonod. Yes. So, pinapalabas nila doon na victim yung aunt ko doon sa conjugal dictatorship. Pinapalabas nila na tinorture siya, pinatay yung uncle ko, yung husband niya, tapos kinuha yung auntie ko, tinorture siya, nakunan siya. All these things are, yes, totoo yon na tinorture siya, totoo na in-interrogate siya. Pero alam mo yung hindi nila sinabi doon sa conjugal dictatorship, Peter, na maraming pinatay ang auntie ko at yung uncle ko. Diba? Yun yung
selective. Gusto ko lang tanungin, sino ang mga pinapatay nila? Sino ang mga binibiktima ng CPP-NPA? Anong klaseng mga tao ito?
Hindi lang sila, so most people think, no, dati, bago nagkaroon ng NTF-LCAC, most people thought na ang pinapatay lang ng CPP-NPA, NDF are, sabihin na natin mga combatants, whether police or military. Akala nila ganon. Hindi totoo yun. Mas maraming pinapatay ang CPP-NPA, NDF na non-combatants. Tayo, yung mga law-abiding citizens. Especially those who refuse to become members, those who refuse to pay revolutionary tax. May kilala ako na, alam mo yun, harap-harapan, Peter, sa Mindanao, isang NPA camp. hindi ko na nasasabihin, basta sa Mindanao, Region 10, may bata who's like, 6 years old. And I really saw myself in her because while we were having lunch, kasama ko yung commander na, NPA commander na tita niya at lola niya bale, tapos yung uncle niya, no? So, kumakain kami, tapos kinikwento nila na pinatay nila yung sarili nilang kapatid na hindi NPA kasi may kuprahan. Tapos merong tubuhan at saka kuprahan. Ayaw na niya magbayad ng rent tax. So dahil ayaw niya magbayad ng rent tax, sabi nung kapatid niya na babae, niretratan namin. Ganon, walang remorse. And the 6-year-old girl was right in front of me and right in front of the sister of the victim na kumbaga uncle lolo niya.
Oo, pamangkin nila, yung kaharap nila pamangkin nila.
Oo. And then they were talking about it like a regular lunch conversation and I said, kawawa naman po siya. Sabi niya, anong kawawa? Bakit siya kawawa? Ang kapal na mukha niya, ayaw niya magbayad ng rent tax. So, this was the kind of discussion that, this 6-year-old girl was hearing. Part siya ng lunch na to. And then I saw myself, I was like, my God, I was this girl. I was this child who grew up having lunch, having dinner, thinking killing is normal. And sabi ko, sana, pinag-pray ko yung bata. And I was praying na sana magkaroon siya ng sariling path like me. Na sana makalabas siya dun sa trap na yun, yung sa entire clan na CPP-NPA, NDF din. Kasi yun yung problema na etong reality ng kung ano yung pinaglalaban natin. Yung mga sinabi remember mo dun sa testimony ni Kaamihan, na sinabi niya na maraming nire-rape, maraming mga sexually abused na mga kadre. Hindi lang sa CPP-NPA camps nangyayari yan, Peter. In the homes of even the high-ranking na mga CPP-NPA, hindi ako mag-name ng names, pero merong mga sikat na mga single mothers na actually kaya sila single mother at special child yung anak nila kasi ang bumuntis sa kanila tatay nila na CPP. Pero mga sikat yan na nasa mainstream media. And they are not condemning the CPP-NPA, NDF with the influence that they have, with the power that they have. Kasi ako, nag-mainstream media ako sa newspaper, pero umalis ako kasi hindi ko kaya yung corruption. May mga tao na matino sa media, tapos alam mo yung mga operatives ng CPP na nasa media na babanggain ka, sisiraan ka. Hindi kasi ako Miss J,
yes,
ba yung nabasa ko na pinapoison ng father? Yes.
Yes, that's her. That's her po.
So, ang reality nito, Peter, is that we need to be able to have the voice na, kasi kung halimbawa, magpapa-intimidate ka, magpapatakot ka, the way my mom kept quiet. So, ang sa akin, kung tatahimik ako, papatayin din lang naman ako na, di ba? Pinoison nga ako na tahimik ako eh. Anong difference ng lumaban ako out in the open versus patayin ako in silence? So I'd rather fight. Yun eh. Kasi nung nakita ko na imaginein mo yung pain na, Peter, up to now, yung closure na normally, na meron ka ng closure pag namatay yung magulang mo, wala akong ganong closure sa mama ko, Peter. Because when I wanted to attend her burial, when my auntie, the non-NPA auntie of mine, the two of us, when we wanted to go to my mother's burial, sabihan ka ba naman ng tatay mo na huwag kang umattend dahil pag pumunta ka, kasama kang ililibing. Kasama kang ililibing doon sa, ng nanay mo, sa grave niya. Di ba? Parang, do you think, yun eh. Sabi ko, kung hindi man ako gustong lumaban noon, if I was keeping quiet, the fact that he did all those things, kasi sa akin, I was willing to just, I was trying to move on, Peter. I was trying to get married. I was trying to move to another country. I was trying to be normal. And then, he tortured my mom. He killed my mom. The torture was 9 months and 5 days. And then I wasn't allowed to mourn. I wasn't allowed to grieve. I wasn't allowed to be there. That kind of thing changes people. That kind of thing.
Does.
If I didn't want to fight before, I'm fighting now. Kasi nakita ko na gustong umalis ng mama ko sa CPP-NPA. Gusto niya talagang umalis. She didn't want to die na karga-karga niya yung konsensya niya. Kasi, Peter, hindi magkapareho ang background ng mama at papa ko. Yung mama
Yeah.
ko is like every other manobo, like every other IT, na kinuha at 12 years old. What choice did she have? Vitiated yung consent niya. Since she was 12 years old, vitiated yung consent niya. And that's why I agree with the programs of the government na bigyan muna ng chance yung mga gustong mag-surrender, bigyan muna ng chance mag-surrender
Yeah.
because marami sa kanila, katulad ng mama ko, na vitiated yung consent. Hindi naman pumasok lahat ng tao sa CPP-NPA kasi gusto nilang pumatay. No. Maraming mga walang choice kasi yung mga madre, yung Religions of the Virgin Mary na mga communist termite, yung Jesuits sa Hingoong City na mga communist termite doon sa Christ the King College, lahat yun. Did they think about using my mom? They used my mom like a prostitute, Peter. She would have to have sex with high-ranking politicians and generals. Kaya hindi nakulong ang nanay ko. Ilang beses pinuntahan ng Philippine Constabulary yung mama ko. Dahil yung house namin, pinupuntahan ng helicopter ng ganun ka high level ang mama ko. May mga helicopter na pumupunta. Tapos, kung sino yung arresting officer sa kanya, nagiging kabit siya. Kita mo yung moral compass, yung paano magkakaroon ng
You
kailangan natin ng strong na moral compass para matapos natin yung CPP-NPA NDF. Dapat hindi na ba-bribe ang mga officials, di ba?
you wrote
Hindi
something
lang,
here. Yeah. You wrote something here, Dre. Sorry, nagkakagulo kasi I think it was my signal. Kasi medyo masama ang panahon dito. I just want to read something in your book, Dre, that you wrote about one thing about mother. You said there's a saying that goes, when love is gone, there's always justice. And when justice is gone, there's always force. And when force is gone, there's always mom. But this was taken away from you, right, Dre? This was absolutely taken away from you because for you to have written this, you have that kind of longing for a mother because as you said in the book, your mom is your dad's partner in crime for so many years. She knew, Dre, in this book, it was stated that she knew about your abuse.
yeah, she
She knew
knew.
about it when
And I
she
still loved
was,
her. And I
yeah,
still loved her. She
when she
picked
was
me up.
swabbing you with agua oxigenada and betadine. She was swabbing your intimate area, and that for me, Dre, hindi ko alam how, or I don't know if you know how your mom was feeling when it was actually happening when she was doing those things to you because the book was so clear and it was so compelling for the readers to think na pwede kong i-judge ang nanay mo eh. Pwede ko siyang i-judge. What the fuck? Mrs.
Hmm.
Toledo, what what? What?
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
at the end part of your book, when she was asking for you to pray for her soul, when in her deathbed, when she was asking you to pray for her soul and she was asking you to somehow asking for your forgiveness, Dre, napatawad mo ba? Your mom? Did you
Hmm.
forgive her?
Because she asked for it. Because because her last words were I love you eh. You know, when she couldn't anymore talk kasi pinaralyzed na siya, yung tinotorture na siya. And then my dad was commanding her to say I love you to him and she refused. And she just said I love you to me. And then you know, um the I know a lot of people, some say I have Stockholm syndrome with my mom, why I still love her. The thing is, I love my mom, I love my dad. It's normal for a child to love the parents, di ba? I just wanted apology eh. I just wanted for them to acknowledge the wrong that they have done. And
I think at the end of the day, the fact that she warned me, the fact that she wanted to get out of the CPT when she felt that she was dying. Some people, they only change when they feel that death is imminent. When they feel
Mhm.
that it's almost there. The she doesn't want to die without having to apologize for what she has done, and um, for her to say all those things to warn me. And it was difficult for me, Peter, because at the time when my mom said na dito nakatira ang Supremo, that Tagalog is not my first language. So I didn't
Yes, yes.
understand what she meant by dito. I thought dito was like, alam mo yun, in the same village or in the same street, or, I really thought she was referring to a neighbor. I didn't understand
Mhm.
when she said dito nakatira ang Supremo that she was referring to my dad, because they promised me that he stopped killing. They promised me when they saw na hindi normal sa akin pumatay. They just kept saying na it was in the past, 'di ba? And they said na people for example, yung mga CPP-NPA, nagtataka sila, what happened in April 1986 when Kampanyang Ahos suddenly abruptly ended? Kasi more than 6 months na
Mhm.
yung patayan eh. Hindi matigil-tigil yung patayan sa Mindanao. And then they were wondering, what happened in April 1986? Why did it suddenly stop? It stopped because my father wanted to go to the hospital because my mama was giving birth alone. And she gave birth, nasa NICU ako. The entire time my father was absent because he was killing people while my mother was having a complicated birth. And I said, you know, I accepted those murders. I accepted those killings, thinking in my head back then when I was young, I thought those deaths were justified. I thought that my father
Yeah.
was right in killing whoever he killed. But then, and now I apologize even for thinking that way. But of course, I was a child, diba? I mean, how else
Of
was I
course, of
supposed to
course.
think? And I wanted to justify in my head that the people who were supposed to take care of me, diba, were reasonable people. That they would not just kill randomly without any reason, without any justification. And I just feel that a lot of the victims of the CPP-NPA NDF, yung mga desaparecidos who, never had any closure because they don't know where their child, their husband, their brother, their sister had been buried. Or if they just don't know because these are just the disappeared, di ba? Ang daming ganun eh. When we're talking about thousands, so, yung fear ng mga tao na bakit bakit sila takot lumaban, 'di ba? Bakit sila takot lumaban sa CPP-NPA NDF? It's not because they don't want to fight back. It's because dati, nung before President Duterte, wala silang tatakbuhan na gobyerno, wala silang tatakbuhan na NTF-LCAC. And back then, alam mo yung barangay development program ng NTF-LCAC is so important because
Yeah.
ito yung dito napaparamdam ng mismong gobyerno yung presence na kahit may NPA, kahit may CPP-NPA, NDF sa area na yan, bahala na ito, magde-develop kami ng roads, magde-develop kami ng bridges, maglalagay kami ng schools, maglalagay kami ng livelihood. Dati kasi ang ginagawa ng CPP-NPA, ina-isolate nila yung mga geographically isolated and depressed areas. Talagang sinasadya nila na ayaw nilang ma-develop yung areas na yon. Kasi pag hindi
Which is happening
na-develop,
right now, Drea, no? In relation to what you're saying, we will just show you a picture of a recent happening of how
yeah,
the burning of CPP-NPA. Lilibet, can you show us that photo, please? Ito po ang nangyayari ngayon. Sunod-sunod na panunog ng NPA members sa Northern Samar, tinatawag na anti-development ng NTF-LCAC. Yan ang nangyayari ngayon. As we would like to thank Kalinaw News for this. Ayan po ang ginagawa ng CPP-NPA. As you can see, this burning of the trucks are happening in developed roads. Dre, ganyan na sila eh, no? Because the roads have been developed, na nakikita na natin ang unti-unting pagsulong ng gobyerno laban sa kanila. So what they do now talagang babaliin nilang ekonomiya hindi ba, Drei? So
Yes.
that's what they're doing to people. These are people who are working. Hindi yan truck hindi yan truck ng army, hindi yan truck ng pulis,
Mm.
hindi yan truck ng gobyerno. Yan ay truck ng bigas
Yeah.
yata na nagdadala ng mga goods around the province. Drei, what held you together? Because as I was reading your book, kung medyo mahina-hina kang tao, I don't think you will survive the ordeal. What held you together?
I wanted to make sense out of my suffering. I wanted to help others instead of focusing on my own pain. I wanted to help other children like me that had been abused for decades. I wanted to give them a voice. I wanted for them to have somebody to identify with, to know that, they can choose to stay alive, to stay strong, and not to let their lives fall apart just because of what has been done to them. And I wanted to show that not all victims become drug addicts, not all victims become, sexually perverse, not all victims become killers, not all victims become alcoholics. I wanted to show them that my path is also a choice. That I'm not special. That there that they can be just as strong if they wanted to. And as to what made that possible, for me, it's knowing how to choose your tribe, knowing how to choose your family. If you were born into a bad family, then consciously create a new one. Find friends that you can trust, that you can treat as your own family. Um, because I was able to get my strength, my emotional support from them. Actually, Peter, my father, attempted many times. He didn't know how loyal my friends were to me, and he would approach these very good people, the friends that I have. He would approach them and tell them that you should stay away from my daughter because she's crazy. And they will just listen, pretend to listen, and then they will tell me that your dad said this about you, and we know it's not true. We've known you for a long time, and we know that he's lying. And they said that obvious naman na gusto kanyang siraan kasi sino bang ama, sinong magulang, ang normal na magulang ang sisiraan ng sariling anak. Di ba, Peter, kung yung normal situation ng mga totoong mga may mental illness, tinatago yan ng mga family. Kung merong mental illness, whether bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, yung mga totoong may sayad, yung mga mental hospital, tinatago yan ng family, especially in the Philippines. Hindi yan kinakalat, hindi yan sinasabi.
Yan naman din ang isang sad reality natin na kinahihiya ang ganyang klaseng what do you call it? Kapansanan or disability.
Correct.
Or
Yes.
mentally challenged individuals.
And ganun yung psychology in the Philippines. So then, even my friends, they said, it's so unusual. Kung sa ibang pamilya, tinatago yung sa kanya, pinagmamalaki niya para wala kang friends, para wala kang maging family, di ba? So, ako, I don't have like a big circle. And obviously, I'm not really an extrovert. Because I was isolated a lot, growing up. So, anong nangyari? Siguro kung may extrovert side man ako, napatay na yun a long time ago. But, what remains is there's a part of me that I'm really an introvert. So, I socialize whenever necessary, like if I see or find like-minded people that I can work with for projects. Ganun ako project-driven ako purpose-driven ako. So, kung wala akong makitang commonality na we can work together for a bigger cause, hindi ako wala lang. yung siguro at ang nakakatawa nga, Peter, yung alam mo yung comedy side nitong CPP-NPA. Takot na takot yung mama ko parati kasi parati akong namumundok. Umaakyat ako nung nasa UP Diliman ako. Tapos galit na galit siya. Kasi sabi niya, sinabi ko na sa'yo, huwag kang mamundok. Pero, tapos, I'm going to share lang an incident na it's funny because it demonstrates yung framing ng news, kung paano nag-frame ng news yung mga CPP-NPA sa mainstream media, no? Kasi when I was in UP Diliman, my mom was in Cambodia, so she was already working in Cambodia, and then my brother, visiting also from Israel. My brother went to Cambodia to visit my mom, and then he was watching CNN, and then he sees me in the center of the CNN news, no, yung sa framing nila, and it looked like I was the leader of a rally. kasi meron ako ditong headband na stop killing journalists dito. Stop killing journalists. Kasi merong, sa UP Diliman, merong immersion yung kailangan na required sa UP Diliman na ina-assign kami. So at the time, inassign ako sa NUJP, which we know is a CPP-NPA, NDF infiltrated organization. But at the time, I was assigned, no, na dapat doon ako i-immersion sa NUJP. Meron silang rally na stop killing journalists na rally. So at this time, parang sabi nila rally. Sabi ko, bawal po sa religion ko mag-rally. Tapos sabi nila, sorry, natatawa akong tanga ko kasi. Sabi nila, hindi, to, prayer rally, sabi nila. So sabi ko, prayer. So, ako kasi, yun nga, yung masyado akong sabi ko, sige, okay na, kasi mag-pray naman pala tayo. So, si Tanga, which is me, sumama ako kasi prayer daw prayer, gano'n. Prayerful person naman talaga ako. So, sumama ako. Tapos nag-hand out sila, Peter, ng yung nilalagay sa arm.
Mga bands.
Oo, bands, stop killing journalists. Tapos mukha silang mga Fernando po, gano'n. Alam mo yung mga dito kasi sa arm. Syempre ako, alam mo naman, super kikay ako. So parang, ang pangit nun, di ba? Ang pangit. So, ayoko, ginawa ko siyang headband. Ginawa ko dito, ganyan. Tapos stop killing journalists, gano'n. Yung hair ko nun, fashion, yung mataas, ganyan. Parang Imelda Marcos. Tapos may stop killing journalists dito, gano'n. Tapos, nung nagtitake na ng interview, pictures, videos, yung CNN, BBC, gano'n. Ang ginawa hindi ko alam bakit nangyari yon. Ako yung ginawang center point ng lahat ng footage. So, naging front page ako ng Inquirer, ng stop killing journalist, tapos alam mo yung nagmukha akong leader ng isang rally. No?
Yeah.
So, the worst part, nangyari yon ng weekday. Tapos nung weekend, so the time my mom saw the news, sabi ng brother ko na, Ma, si Andrea, nasa rally. Gano'n, And my mom calls me, and na timing, Peter, umakyat ako ng bundok. Pero mountaineering to, like totoong mountaineering.
It's doing it for pleasure.
Yeah. And then, at the time, alam ko na may mga kasama ako sa mountaineering. Na alam kong mga NPA sila. Hindi naman ako takot. Kasi nga, NPA naman yung family ko. Ganun, And so, sumasama ako sa mountaineering. And then my mom gets so angry. She was so livid. Na she was like, sinabi ko na sa'yo, huwag kang mamumundok. Sinabi ko, she was really scared, that and sabi ko, Ma, sabi niya, sinabi mo na, sabi ko, Ma, PE to, may PE ako. PE, kunwari ka pang PE, namundo ka na, sabi ko na sa'yo, huwag ka mamumundo. Ayan, nakita kita sa TV, ayan, leader ka ng rally. Sabi ko, ha? Anong leader? Wala akong rallying, gano'n. Tapos sabi niya, ayan, may stop killing journalists ka pa sa ulo mo. Tapos, so, ito yung reality na minsan, yung the way that the mainstream media will frame news. Yeah, they can also make it appear, for example, ako, akala mo leader ako ng NUJP. Kasi nandun ako sa
Drei, itong mga past episodes, since we began doing this show, ang talagang isang nakakalungkot na pangyayari is how mainstream media is doing a real disservice to the people. Yang nangyari sa'yo na nagmukha kang leader ng rally and you were just told that this is going to be a prayer rally, and then you look like you are leading what do you call it? A protest,
Yeah.
right? So can you imagine the danger of mainstream media, what they're doing to the people, what they could do to the people to bend the reality, to liku-likuin ang katotohanan? They can do that because mainstream media is a very powerful form. Hindi ba, Drei? That's so scary.
Malakas yun kasi alam mo yung the fact na nasa front page ako ng Inquirer the next day.
Yeah.
Tapos nasa BBC, nasa CNN, tapos mukha ko. Oo. Tapos sabi ko, tapos ang worst part, nasa bundok ako nung nag-air. Alam mo yun, nagma-mountaineering ako. So, in all, mukha akong guilty, mukha akong NPA, alam mo yun. Tapos yung mama ko, galit na galit siya. Sabi niya, putang ina, sinabi ko nang huwag kang mamumundok, huwag kang gumaya kay Ka Jojo. Dami niya na sinabi. So sabi ko, mama, hindi talaga ako, nagma-mountaineering ako, PE ko to, relaxation, ganon. So, tapos, syempre hindi ko gets nun, Peter, na nagdadala ng, yung alam mo yung mga mountaineering, hindi ko nag-guess na it's one method na, alam mo yun, dahil PE kasi siya, totoo siya PE ng UP Diliman. So, meron siyang natural na, ang inaakyat naming bundok, mga NPA infested.
Oh my God.
Tapos, alam mo, natatawa ako kasi nagalit sila one time sa akin, Peter. Kasi di ba yung grandpa ko kasi, US Air Force. So, meron akong
jacket.
bag na, hindi parang camouflage na backpack, pero camouflage siya. So, syempre, proud ako kasi grandpa ko yun eh. Ganun. Alam mo yung mga minamana-mana na mga backpack.
Yeah.
So, sabi nila, hoy, takpan mo yan. Sabi ko, bakit? Ang ganda kaya ng camo ko. Kasi maarte ako, alam mo yung naka-eyelashes ako, tapos naka-pek shorts ako, tapos meron akong camo bag. O, di ba, babe na babe, gano'n. tapos sabi nila, gaga, babarilin tayo ng mga NPA. Sabi ko, bakit? Eh, kasi, ano ba yan, ba't ka naka-camo na bag? Sabi ko, kasi maganda. kasi astig, gano'n. Tapos, alam mo yun, I was really the parang dumb blonde in the, alam mo yun, in the group na hindi ko na
can you imagine, Drei, can you imagine that thing na camouflage na bag, walang kaibig-ibig sabihin sa'yo yun, mababaril ka.
Yeah. Oo.
Can you imagine that? Babarilin ng isang taong inosente dahil naka-camouflage.
Yes, dahil daw pwede pagkamali ng pagkabalo.
Oo. So,
and I mean, there are people who, like me, dahil apo ka ng Air Force, syempre proud ka, di ba, na yung lolo ng Air Force. Yeah. So, minsan may mga namamana ka ng mga bag, na mga jacket, na proud kang suotin, di ba? Kahit hindi ka naman Air Force, ganun. So, tapos lalabas yung mga gano'n nilang comment na tatakpan nila ng, alam mo yung neon na backpack cover. Kasi para daw hindi kami barilin. Kasi ang papasukin namin pala NPA territory. So sabi ko, gano'n? So NPA ka din? Ganun ako. Like sabi ko, NPA ka din? Sabi ko, alam mo ba NPA si Ka Jojo, NPA ang papa ko, yung mama ko. At yung ganun ako ka-open. Tapos siguro sa tingin nila na, oh my God, ang tanga-tanga nitong, alam mo yung, just imagine
because you were young.
Yeah, because I was young. I mean, I was 17. Yeah. I was 17, I was 18. So, I really did not understand. Like, why is it wrong to use camouflage? Diba? Parang, what's wrong with it? Pero, yun na nga yung point ko dito na from the perspective of my mom, no, when she was 12 years old, na, imagine mo nun, Peter, na, kung 12 years old ka, manobo ka, tapos ang sasabihin sa'yo, magkakaroon ka ng scholarship, yung academic scholarship, makakapag-aral ka ng college, basta maging part ka lang ng NPA. So, syempre, brilliant young manobos like my mother took that opportunity, seized that opportunity, di ba? Kasi education eh. Alam mo yung ganun ang naging motivation niya na may education na kapalit. Oo. At ang mama at papa niya, kaya lang silang paaralin hanggang high school. Kasi yung public school noon hanggang high school lang. So,
Mm-mm.
sabi ni Papa, nung grandfather ko, sabi ni Papa, ano kayo, mag-keeping up with the Joneses na kung hindi ko afford, bakit kayo mag-university, pwede naman mag-high school kayo, tapos magtrabaho na kayo afterwards. Ganun yung, kasi hindi
Oo,
corrupt
oo.
na principal yung grandfather ko. He was a very upright man. So kung ano yung
Mm-mm.
sweldo niya, yun lang. So sabi niya,
Yeah.
pinaaral kasi ng grandfather ko si Ka Jojo. So
Mm-mm.
yung para sa nursing niya, imbis na nursing, ginamit niya sa underground, ginamit niya sa NPA.
Yeah.
So kumbaga, di ba noong unang panahon, ang style ng mga parents, papaaralin nila yung panganay, tapos dapat yung panganay ang tutulong magpaaral ng mga
Magpapaaral dun
kasunod.
sa kapatid,
Mm.
oo.
Oo. So anong nangyari nun,
Dre,
si Ka Jojo,
oo.
hindi na siya hindi siya nag-aral. Nag-NPA na siya
Ginamit
rin
niya
eh,
yung
na
tuition fee
full-time.
supposedly para sa kilusan. Dre,
Oo,
maraming
dapat
bata
San Carlos
ngayon.
siya.
Oo. Dre, maraming bata ngayon, ng mga nakausap namin mga magulang, ang ninakawan ng mga anak, nilure
Hmm.
into joining CPP-NPA. They were radicalized. Merong mga swinerte na nakuha ulit yung anak. Merong mga
Yes.
hindi na swinerte na nawala na ang anak. Meron namang bumalik yung anak pero yung anak galit sa
NPA na.
magulang.
Yeah,
Di ba?
NPA na.
Dre, anong psychology ito? Just what, since you grew up in this kind of environment, ano ito? Anong ginagamit nila? Kasi ang sinabi nila kaamihan, nilulure ka into romanticizing the ideology, which is
Yes.
actually, in time, pahawakin ka ng baril, papapatayin ka ng tao. Paano yung
Mm.
transition nun nangyayari? Kasi hindi ko naitanong yan kila kaamihan eh. How does the
Okay.
transition happen? And then you stay,
Mm.
despite
Ganito
all.
yung ganito yung nangyayari. Dalawa kasi ang nagiging path, no? Yung kumbaga yung doon sa fourth path na pwede kang pumili kung left ka or right ka, ano mangyayari sa iyo. So, kapag sa pagsampa mo ng Kabataang Makabayan, so naging member ka muna ng KM or one of the yung legal front na organizations na meron sa mga universities, meron sa mga senior high schools, no? So, itong mga anak bayan, etc.
Oo.
So, o
League of
Gabriela, di ba?
Filipino Students.
League of Filipino Students, and UP, di ba? So,
Oo.
all these organizations, mga legal front sila ng National Democratic Front. So, at the time kasi, pag sumasama yung mga kabataan, and these are the brilliant young girls and boys, di ba? In different schools all over the country. So, at the time na, ano pa lang yan eh, puro financial incentive pa lang yan. So, meron silang allowance for recruiting, meron silang, pag may mga na-spot silang mga talent, that's like, ano yun eh, during my time, I was being offered 30,000 per month. Tapos sabi ko, nung ano to, this was 2008, nung inoferan ako ng CPP ng 30,000 per month para mag-recruit ng mga katulad ko daw na maganda at malaki ang boobs. Very specific. Sorry natatawa ako kasi ang specific nila na kailangan maganda at malaki ang boobs. Sabi ko, parang, alam mo yung parang malaking question mark. Kasi bakit sila ganon? Kinukuha talaga nila yung mga magaganda na taga UP Diliman, taga Ateneo, taga UST, taga FEU. Kinukuha nila yung mga magaganda kasi yun yung gagamitin nila. Alam kasi nila na ang government security forces natin predominantly male. So kung gagamit sila ng operative na didikit doon sa mga sundalo, sa mga pulis, babae na akala mo kabit mo lang, pero actually CPP-NPA yan. So akala mo nagbe-beauty queen, nagpa-pageant lang yan na, alam mo yun, nag-miss, Miss Earth, Miss Philippines, Miss whatever. Pero talent, nakuha na siya ng CPP dati pa, nung nasa university pa siya. So, tapos, nadidikitan nila yung mga high ranking ng government. So, whether governor, mayor, nadidikitan nila yung mga congressmen, no? Pero, itong mga akala mong prostitute, akala mo na yung highly paid na mga escorts. Pero actually, operative sila ng Communist Party. So marami yan. Nung time pa ng mama ko, ganun na yan. Time pa ni Ka Jojo, ganun na yan. Hindi yan na ngayon lang nangyari. No, nung 1970s pa, ganyan na yung
kalakaran.
Framework. Oo, kalakaran nila. So nangyayari, di ba, so ano ka muna, Kabataang Makabayan. Ang nangyayari kasi dyan, pag bago ka sumampa na maging part ka ng New People's Army, merong initiation. So, yung initiation na yon, kailangan mong pumatay. May ibibigay sa'yo na target. So, may ibibigay sa'yo yung picture, may ibibigay sa'yo yung address. Tapos yung folder na yon, na nandun yung details, hindi mo tatanungin kung bakit mo kailangan patayin. Basta patayin mo. So, nakalagay yung address, nakalagay yung picture. Bahala ka kung paano mo papatayin. Lalasunin mo ba? Babarilin mo ba? Arsenic
Parang
ba yan?
initiation yan. Parang initiation yan doon sa
Initiation
mga
siya.
nare-recruit.
Initiation siya. Yes, initiation siya. So, pag hindi mo siya ginawa, papatayin yung family mo. Yun ang kapalit. Pag hindi mo,
Which
halimbawa,
brings me to Terry Navarro, the one that you
yes,
have in your
yes,
book.
yes,
She killed
yes,
herself, ladies and gentlemen, because she was being asked, because she was recruited and she was being asked to kill somebody, but she could
yes.
not. So,
She could
on
not.
the time that she needed to kill that target, she killed herself. She drank a
Yes.
poison, isang insecticide, and she killed herself
Hmm.
because she couldn't get herself to kill the target. Can you
Yes.
imagine what
So,
could happen to our children?
and imagine, si Terry Navarro is actually the cousin of General Victor Corpus. So, si Vic Navarro Corpus, General Vic Corpus, no, is actually a first-degree cousin of Terry Navarro. So, ang situation na ganito, di ba, ang bata. So, para hindi siya patayin at hindi patayin yung family niya, papatayin niya yung target. Di ba?
Yeah.
So, ngayon, may pinanghahawakan na ang CPP-NPA-NDF, may pang-blackmail na ang CPP-NPA-NDF laban doon sa anak mo. 'Di ba? Kasi may hawak na sila eh. Sila yung nag-utos at alam nila na itong tao na to patay dahil sa anak mo, 'di ba? So, yun ang strategy na ginagawa nila kaya hawak nila sa liig yung mga bata. So
Kabataan.
kahit hawak nila sa liig. Kaya yung mga bata na minsan nagtataka yung mga parents, dati love na love ako ng anak ko, dati sobrang malambing yung bata. Kaya nag-iiba yung tono ng bata, nagiging dumidistansya. Sometimes, in the case of Terry Navarro, it's actually the child's way of protecting the family kasi hindi nga niya alam na yung napasok niya, it's lair na pala ng mga communist terrorists. Hindi niya naiintindihan. But by the time na nakapasok na siya, nag-initiation na, ang kapalit mo, papatayin niya family niya. So magpe-pretend siya na galit siya sa pamilya niya. Magpe-pretend siya na, get mo yun? Yung parang, yung para lang lumayo yung mga kapatid niya, lumayo yung nanay niya, lumayo yung papa niya. Pero kasi ibig sabihin nun, may nagawa na yung bata. May mission na yun na nagawa. So yung mission na yun, yung kapalit na yun, kung sino yung pinatay ng bata, hawak yun ng Communist Party.
Yeah. Drei, magbabasa lang tayo ng comments. Kaamihan is watching us. Lilibet, can we have a Kaamihan's hello, Sir Peter. It's very interesting to listen and read views of people on communist insurgency. No matter how the CPP cherishes itself, it is destructive and violent by nature. Though they were, in a time, intensively influential, as their tactics and strats are very fluid, they can transform their enemies, church, elites, oligarchs, opposition as their friends in a certain period, but will crush them one by one once they are capable of seizing power.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. And
nakakilabot, sabi ni Doors.
And totoo yun, yung sinasabi ni Kaamihan, na ganun sila yung when I call them wolves in sheep's clothing, when I call them communist termites, it's because they really pretend. And alam mo, makikita mo, ito, observation ko lang to. For example, sa totoong buhay, maganda si Yusek Badoy. She's very pretty. Yung, alam mo yung, makikita mo, yung mga mainstream media na communist termites, pag, if you feature nila yung mga statements ni Yusek Badoy, alam mo yung ginagawa nila, papalabasin nila yung eye bags niya, yung ini-HDR nila yung picture na, parang papalabasin nila lahat ng pores na hindi naman talaga nag-exist. Like, alam mo yon yung,
they ine-edit nila to make her look bad.
They edit your photo. Matitel mo, ito yung isang clue, no, na Sa mga
So parang
totoo, yung
ginagawa
mga
nilang kamukha ni Maria Ressa, lahat nung magaganda.
kasi di ba, sa totoo, she's actually very pretty. Maganda
I
talaga siya.
interviewed
Kasi
her in this show. She is
yeah,
very
yeah,
pretty.
she's very pretty. So, kumbaga, syempre ako, na nakita ko na siya in person, and maganda talaga siya. Tapos, alam mo yung makikita mo yung mga, ano niya, supposedly, quotable quote niya, yung mga quote
Yeah.
cards, kumbaga na, halimbawa, nasa Manila Bulletin, or Star, or
Oo.
ABS-CBN, tapos, Yusek Badoy, ganun. Tapos yung picture na gagamitin nila, yung pinakapangit na hindi naman
Yeah.
ganun ang itsura niya in real life. Alam mo yon. So, parang, ito yung strategy na dinidiscredit nila kasi merong halo effect yan eh. Pag maganda yung tao,
Yeah.
kita mo yung ginagawa ng CPP-NPA. Bakit nila kinukuha yung mga pwedeng mag-pageant? Bakit sila kumukuha ng mga magagandang babae as Gabriela na representative? Bakit sila kumukuha ng mga magaganda or gwapo, no? Like League of Filipino Students, Stand UP, kumukuha yan sila ng mga gwapo at saka magaganda kasi may halo effect. Yung halo effect
Yes.
sa subconscious, so for example, tinatanong mo kanina, paano ba nila nakukuha? Like, how did they get these young people who used to be so loving to their siblings, they used to be so loving to their friends, to their parents, and then all of a sudden, just like that, they become, full of angst, they become so angry, they hate their family, parang nagbo 180-degree turn
Yeah,
yung
and they
bata, no?
stay. Drei, kasi they stay.
They
Kasi
stay
kwento ni
because of, they
Kaamihan ang
stay,
buhay eh. Kwento ni
yeah, they
Kaamihan ang buhay sa
stay,
bundok.
oo, they say because marami sa kanila, yung, alam mo yung in their teenage years, kasi nagde-develop pa yung brain yan eh. But in their teenage years, they get lured into the mountains or they get lured into joining yung legal fronts na nasa white areas. They are incentivized because of the promise of a romantic possibility. Like for example, merong magandang kadre or may gwapo na kadre, naka-age nila. So akala nila, mas may chance ako na alam mo yun, baka maging boyfriend ko to, baka maging girlfriend ko to. Basta nandito lang ako sa sama. So, hindi
niro-romanticize nila. Niro-romanticize nila, Drei.
Hindi lang siya na romanticize yung ideology.
Yung
It's
ideology.
also weaponizing. Hindi lang yon. That's one thing. Pero on the other hand, they also weaponize sex. Yung weaponizing nila of sex is they use a person na akala mo nung nililigawan ka, akala mo love ka talaga, akala mo may gusto talaga sa'yo. And then they use that particular person, that other cadre, to lure you deeper into the movement. Kasi ano yun eh, kasi romantic ang approach, 'di ba? Para kayong Bonnie and Clyde, 'di ba? Partners in crime. Ganun yung dating nun eh. And for
parang
meron
pa kasing romantic notion that they are against all odds kayo eh. Hindi ba?
Yes,
may ganun pa
yes,
eh.
yes. So merong certain 'di ba? May certain appeal
Merong certain
to young
degree
people.
of
Especially for young people who are craving adventure, they're craving for romance, they're craving for a bigger purpose. But at the same time, yung bigger purpose na yon, merong romance, merong merong element of adventure. And akala nila na ano lang siya, na itong, kasi kita mo, even in the so-called mga documentaries na pinapalabas nila about the New People's Army before, pinapalabas nila na may pinaglalaban ng NPA.
Yes.
All the time, makikita mo sa mga pinapalabas nila mga documentaries. Malalaman mo na yung mga nagsasabi, nagpapakita na, may alikain yan, may pinaglalaban, these are communist termites. Yung mga akala mo na naman maganda, well, maraming multi-awarded to na journalist or marami na siyang mga pro-children's rights or pro internally displaced persons na mga initiatives or pro-refugees. Akala mo ganon. Pero kasi Peter, ito nakita namin with our own two eyes, dun mismo sa Lanao del Norte, during the Marawi siege, yung mismong mga akala mo na nag-volunteer sila tapos Red Cross, pero actually mga CPP-NPA. Kasi syempre, nung time na nagkagulo, di ba? Bakit inalis si Judy Tagiwalo? Si Judy Tagiwalo. Maraming mga nawalang pera. Bakit? Kasi ang sa akin, kung alam na nga natin na communist siya, di ba? Hindi naman yan tinatago na communist si Judy Tagiwalo. Pero, at the time, ang laki kasi ng pera na dumadaan through her. Kasi siya yung secretary di ba? Ng DSWD. So, ang problema na from kung halimbawa ganito kalaki ang funding mo, DSWD ka, DPWH ka, DepEd ka, tapos let's say or Department of Agriculture ka or Department of Agrarian Reform ka, tapos communist terrorist ka or communist termite ka, millions ang dumadaan sa'yo na pera, no? So, nangyari nun sa Marawi, maraming mga hindi naman nakuha ng ISIS, pero dahil hindi sila binibigyan ng tulong, ng timely help, no? Hindi sila nabigyan ng timely help. Bakit? Kasi ninakaw ng CPP na nakaupo sa gobyerno. So yung question kanina, may question tayo na nagtatanong na, pwede bang i-name yung mga CPP-NPA, NDF na nakaupo?
Kasi may tanong dito, Drei, where you are right now as an investigative journalist and your experience as who grew up in this environment, may nagtatanong dito kung pwede mo daw bang ma-pinpoint kung anong sangay ng gobyerno at kung sino-sino ang nasa gobyerno ang napapatakbo ng bansa na miyembro.
Na-file na yung mga reports na yan. It's already with the Malacanang. So matagal nang hawak ng Malacanang yung listahan.
Okay.
So for the security of the people involved na kasi for example pag nag-name ka kasi ng name, may mga tao na innocent na nakapaligid sa kanila. So hindi mo you know what I'm saying? May security
yun ang
yan.
poprotektahan natin. Oo.
Oo, kasi may mga tao, for example, pag may niname ako, no, I give it directly to Malacanang. Because ang important dyan, sila yung mag-a-assess kung paano nila i-resolve. Is this person somebody na pwede nilang gawing asset? Pwede ba nila i-turn yung tao na to? Pwede ba siya maging surrenderer? Or kailangan, di ba? So, may mga evaluation na ginagawa. Kasi we don't want naman na mangyari is parang trial by publicity. Diba? The reason that hindi rin naman, kumbaga we cannot be, parang we cannot sink to the level of the CPP-NPA na yung ginagawa nila na trial by publicity nila. So ang sa atin, we follow due process. Yung mga names na meron tayo, ibigay natin sa gobyerno, no? Ibigay natin sa NTF-LCAC, at sila yung mag-a-assess kung paano nila to i-approach. But ang isa rin na mabibigay ko na guideline is kailangan maingat tayo. Please be careful. Please, all the information that you have for those na may mga kilalang CPP, NPA, NDF na high-ranking leaders, ibigay natin to sa mga trusted officials. Like, ibigay nyo kay, humanap kayo ng paraan na makuha ni General Esperon or makuha, sino yung mga nasa NTF-LCAC, doon nyo ibigay na maghanap kayo ng paraan na huwag nyo i-course through other people. Kasi kung idadaan nyo through other people, may chance na
may danger
hindi makaabot.
Tsaka may danger na ma-endanger ang buhay ninyo.
Yes. So kailangan trusted person. So halimbawa trusted na colonel or general ng army na talagang kakilala nyo na may integrity, doon nyo ilapit para umabot doon sa kinauukulan. Pero wag tayong parang ang sa akin lang kasi as somebody na nalason na, matagal ang recovery pag acute renal failure. Hindi siya, alam mo yon, hindi ka magagaling in 3 years. No. It would take at least 7 years to heal from acute renal failure. So, I don't want others to parang think brazenly na ganun kadali. Kasi, kailangan maingat kayo. Yung mga pagkain ninyo, kayo ang mag-prepare. Huwag kayong, kung kakain kayo with other people, make sure that you always look at your food na hindi malagyan ng arsenic, hindi, alam mo yon, yung if you can eat na dire-diretso, tapos pag kung iiwanan mo yung pagkain mo, make sure there's somebody you trust that is looking at your food or your drink. Iinom ka, kakain ka, kailangan yung sealed. Kung hindi ikaw nag-prepare, bumili ka from fast food like McDonald's or whatever. Pero kailangan sure ka na malinis kasi kapag yung paglaban natin dito, we have to be smart, we have to be aware of the risk, And we have to be, we already know that now is the time to fight. We know now that because the popularity and the trust rating of President Duterte will most certainly trickle over to the next, whoever will be the next administration. Kasi syempre,
Yeah.
yung mass support na meron for President Duterte, kung sino yung pinaka-i-endorse niya, syempre, malaki ang magiging bearing nun sa kung sino yung magiging i-vote ng next na magiging next president, next administration. So, ako, I can say na I have high confidence in the NTF-ELCAC. I have high confidence in its continuation. And important na ang tandaan natin na ang National Task Force to End the Local Communist Armed Conflict, whole of nation approach ito. So hindi pwede na sila lang ang nasa forefront. Kailangan civilians like us, law-abiding citizens like us, we need to come forward.
Help them and contribute.
Yes, kasi kaya lang naman nag-Diyos-Diyosan, kaya lang naman nag-yawa-yawang Diyos-Diyosan yung mga CPP-NPA. Kasi nasanay sila that people crouch in fear. Nasanay sila na papatay sila ng isa. For example, when my father tortured and murdered my mom, ang normal reaction ng tao is tatahimik. 'Di ba?
Yes.
Tatahimik ka, hindi ka na lalaban. Pero kailangan nating isipin, kung lahat tayo magpapa-intimidate, kung lahat tayo ganun na lang, natatahimik ka na lang, kaya ka rin nilang patayin. Kung tatahimik ka, kaya ka rin nilang patayin. Si Keith and Nolven Absalon, 'di ba?
Yes.
They're unarmed na civilians, they're non-combatants. They were deliberately shot. Hindi sila naman namatay sa landmine. In contrary to all
they were shot in the face.
They were shot in the face. And nung nilabas ko yan, Peter, napansin mo maraming nagalit na mga CPP sa wall ko. Sabi nila, bakit ko daw nilabas yung picture na. Sabi ko, paano ko i-claim yung truth, di ba? Na binaril siya diretso sa ulo kung hindi ko ilalabas yung evidence. Di ba? Sabi nila na binabastos ko daw yung patay. No, I was fighting for the rights of Nolven and Keith Absalon. Because sinabi ko talaga yon na ako alam ko yung pakiramdam, Peter, na yung mamatayan ka ng family, ang lahat ng tao dadaan sa grief na mamamatayan ka ng family. Pero hindi lahat ng tao magkakaroon ng situation na ma-encounter nila na yung pinatay nila na family, yung minurder na family member nila, no? Imumor ng buong mundo, pero mali ang pinagdadasal nila kasi hindi naman siya namatay ng landmine. Yeah. Namatay naman talaga siya sa gunshot wound.
And the landmine kasi is a trigger landmine. Hindi siya yung landmine na pag naapakan mo, sasabog. Tinitrigger siya, meron siyang detonator.
And it wasn't detonated until much later na nasa ospital na yung ibang witnesses na nag-survive. Kasi may mga binaril din sila na hindi namatay. So, alam mo yun, sobrang distorted. Kasi ang nakakagigil dun sa situation ng yung kay Keith Absalon and kay Nolven Absalon is that ang daming mga nagsasabi condolences, nag-issue pa ng statement itong CPP na they own up to it. Anong own up to it? Paano sila mag-own up to it when they did not, yung sasabihin nila na landmine, accidental blast? Paano sila nag-own up to it na kasinungalingan pa rin ng mga pinagsasabi nila? Imagine if you lose a loved one. Halimbawa, ikaw yung nanay or tatay or kapatid, tapos alam mo na pinatay, alam mo na in cold blood, binaril sa ulo, di ba? Alam mo na ganon. Can you grieve, can you mourn properly kung ang sinasabi ng buong mundo, landmine ang cause of death? Syempre hindi, di ba? Masakit. In the same manner that I was deprived of the basic human right to grieve the death of my mother.
Yeah.
Even yung sasabihin nila na hindi siya namatay, na hindi naman talaga siya tinorture, hindi naman talaga siya minurder. Na lahat kami na witness namin na tinorture siya, na witness namin na minurder siya, tapos sasabihin nila hindi. Tapos imagine mo yung gaslighting na sasabihin nila ibang narrative. Tapos yung buong mundo sasabihin, kawawa naman na landmine blast. We apologize for what we have kunwari nag-apologize ang CPP. Anong apology doon? Did they actually own up to what happened? No. It was
No
a
one surrendered.
deliberate. Kaya nga. 'Di ba? So sabi, ang reality doon is that as civilians, no, as civilians, grabe ang influence kasi ni Keith. Grabe yung influence niya as an MVP, 'di ba? As a very
Yeah.
promising young athlete. Maraming mga na-encourage na kabataan in Masbate na hindi naman pala kailangan sumama sa CPP-NPA para magkaroon ng scholarship. Pwede naman pala na maging sports na scholar. Pwede pala maging varsity scholar na para makapasok ako sa mga top universities, 'di ba? That kind of
So you believe, Drei?
example.
So do you believe, Drei, that the killing of Keith was deliberate?
Yes. Yes, it was. It was deliberate because there was a gunman yung ang nangyari kasi diyan, meron talagang nakaabang doon sa path in the Masbate City.
Yes.
Yung bike path is a main road yon ng Masbate City. So parati sila nagbabike sa area na yon. Maraming witnesses kasi maraming nakatira sa area na yon. Nakausap ko yung mga tao na nakatira sa area na yon. At ang takot nila was that sabi nila, ma'am, kasi alam mo, hindi namin alam sino ang matatrust namin. Kasi ang nilalabas po is puro nilalabas nila is landmine. Pero ma'am, the entire time, walang landmine blast. Nung dinala namin yung mga survivor, dinala namin sa ospital, hindi namin alam kailan sumabog yung landmine. Basta sure kami na patay na si Nolven, patay na si Keith. Kasi ang nangyari nun, nung nakapila sila, di ba pag nagbabike, kapila yung mga bikers. So, may nakamotor na nag-stop, nag-overtake kina Nolven at saka kay Keith, tapos tinuro si Keith at si Nolven. Tapos, tinuro sila nung nakamotor, tapos yung nakaabang na yung mga NPA sa gilid ng road, tapos pinagbabaril sila. Yun ang nangyari. Walang landmine in the entire situation.
Okay.
So yung landmine na yan, na nagkaroon ng mga shrapnel injury, hindi na yan na-witness ng mga witnesses. Hindi nila alam kung kailan may pinasabog na bomba. Hindi nila alam kailan yon. Basta by the time, kasi lumagpas ang isang oras, walang dumating na police. We're talking about murder in the middle of the city and the police was not there. So, yun yung reality na ang Masbate kasi, pugad yan ng CPP-NPA. Yan ang reality niyan. Yung naging situation, syempre ang mga witnesses, ang daming nakatira doon ang daming nakatira sa road na yun. Syempre lahat sila takot. Kasi kung yan ang naging official statement, paano sila, ang sabi nila na, kasi yun yung nag-send sa akin.
Parang hindi ka mabibigyan ng justice. If this happens to you, the truth will be more than truth. Yeah.
Kaya sabi nila na, kasi tinatanong ko, sabi ko, sino ba sa inyo nag-send sa akin ng picture? Kasi ang nag-send sa akin, anonymous na account eh. So sabi ko, sinong nag-send? Kasi sabi nila, ma'am, actually marami kami sinendan, kayo lang ang naglabas nung picture. Kasi takot sila na kung, alam mo yon may masendan sila, tapos communist pala, or alam mo yon so kaya anonymous yung account. Tapos ako naman, dahil nag-cover na ako sa Marawi Siege, syempre alam ko anong itsura ng IED blast. At saka bomber yung lolo ko. So alam ko anong itsura ng IED blast. Pagtingin ko pa lang sa picture, obvious naman na AK-47 yung ginamit. Obvious naman na binutasan yung ulo, 'di ba, ng barel. So, yun yung difficulty na kailangan makita natin na hindi lahat ng pagkakataon, kahit itong sa case ni Nolven at ni Keith Absalon, na pinapalabas ng CPP na at least kami nagsusorry, ang military never nagsusorry. Alam mo yun, ang BS ng mga narrative nila. Kasi hindi naman totoo yun di ba? So, yun yung point ko na, if there's anything that I want people to understand from crossing the red line, it's also that they have to understand na ang lalim ng indoctrination, ng brainwashing sa CPP, NPA, NDF, that very, very few people emerge to still become truth tellers, to be able to tell the truth after being inside that network. Konti lang ang mga talagang honest.
Mhm.
Bakit? Kasi alam mo yung kaya yung sinasabi ko na grabe yung courage, grabe yung bravery ni Kaamihan. Kasi imaginein mo na all the rape cases that she is aware of, di ba? Na ginawa sa mga kadre. Pero ang dami naman, hindi lang naman si Kaamihan ang may alam, di ba?
Yeah.
Only Kaamihan has the courage, the moral compass, the courage to actually condemn it, to publicly condemn it. Diba? And ang sa akin is, alam mo yung common denominator ng sino yung mga matatapang? Yung mga matatapang are people na, may mga pinagdaanan na tayo. Marami na tayong pinagdaanan that we don't necessarily publicly acknowledge. But whatever tests, whatever difficulties we have gone through, we know that it's so much better to tell the truth, to publicly condemn crime, than to suffer in silence. Kasi kung alam mo kung ano yung pakiramdam ng mag-suffer in silence, alam mo na ayaw mong maranasan niya ng maraming bata, ayaw mong maranasan niya ng marami pang ibang victim. You want to be able to give a path that it's not going to be easier.
Yeah.
By any measure, it's not going to be easier, but it will be a little bit better because they know meron silang alay. It will be a little bit, whatever little bit strength that they can get, knowing na, meron palang mga rape survivors na hindi nagsisuicide. Meron palang mga rape survivors na hindi nagiging drug addict, hindi nagiging killer, hindi nagiging kabit, hindi nagiging prostitute.
Hindi napapariwara, kumbaga.
Oo, hindi napapariwara. Exactly. Yun yung word na hindi ko
Oo, hindi papariwara. Drei, isang message para sa mga magulang at sa mga kabataan na nakikinig sa atin who's struggling to hear the truth or who's struggling to acknowledge the truth. Kasi diyan tayo ngayon, yan ang mahirap ngayon sa atin because of the advent of the social media, how they play it all up. Sorry, not the social media, the mainstream media, pardon me. The mainstream media, how they play it all up, or the disservice of not really telling how it's supposed to be told. Drei, since naging buhay mo yan, isinabuhay mo yan, nalampasan mo yan, at ngayon, nandiyan ka sa challenge of protecting yourself and staying alive and telling the truth and giving voice to those who were victimized by CPP-NPA. Can you just tell something to the parents and to the children who still not, na malabo pa sa kanila ang mga bagay na ito?
So, for the parents who are listening to our show as of this evening, I want you to be able to understand na it's better to be overprotective. It's better to have every now and then arguments with your children as you educate them. Kasi syempre nabe-brainwash sila sa school. Ang important kasi dyan is bago pa sila mag-senior high school, bago pa sila makuha ng mga recruiters in the university, kailangan buksan nyo na yung isip nila. Yung pagbabasa, bakit ko ba sinulat yung Crossing the Red Line? It's exactly to help parents and to help young people have advanced information. Kasi pag alam mo na yung information, hindi ka na mapapaliktad-paliktad. Hindi ka na nila mabibilog, hindi ka na nila maloloko, hindi ka na nila mamamanipulate. So, for the parents, sometimes ayaw nating makipag-away sa mga anak natin, especially kasi they look up to the teachers or the recruiters that are in school. So, if you have to make the hard decision of removing your child from that school, di ba? I-homeschool ninyo. If you have to make that decision, then consider the repercussion na kung hindi mo siya tanggalin, baka mamundok siya. Di ba? Kapag namundok siya, baka hindi lang siya ang makuha, baka pati yung mga kapatid niya, kunin niya. Kasi ganun yung nangyari sa mom ko Ganun yung nangyari kay Ka Jojo sa mom ko, kinukuha nila yung younger nila na kapatid. So, if you have like one child na tututukan ng CPP, NPA, NDF na recruiters in universities, in high schools, senior high schools, tapos hindi kayo, kasi kayo ang pinaka first defense. Kayo yung, as parents, kayo yung pinaka first defense. So, you can imagine yung difficulty ko na kung sino yung dapat na first defense ko, sila mismo yung mga communist terrorists. Mahirap yon, di ba? Kasi I have to find ways to survive, to live, na alam mo yon, yung ang hirap to grow up na I have to make sense of the violence. I have to make sense of why are they doing this, you know? And understanding why they did what they did does not make it any easier on me. Understanding kung ano yung ideology nila, ano yung pananaw nila, it doesn't make it any easier for me. But the fact that when I was 4 years old, sinabihan na ako ng mama ko na NPA yung family namin, masama ang NPA, you know, that kind of, inunahan na niya ang papa ko. Kumbaga, yun ang reason, Peter, bakit ko pinatawad yung mama ko. Because my mom was the only one na, kumbaga, nakapasok na siya sa lair ng mga demonyo, she doesn't want to include me. She already knows what's waiting eh. Diba? So, at 4 years old, sinabihan na ako ng mama ko na, anak, NPA ang pamilya natin, pero masama ang NPA. Imagine that kind of knowledge being ingrained.
Ano nagsasabi sa iyo nito, NPA, Drei?
Yes.
Ano nagsasabi sa iyo nito, NPA?
And hindi sinugarcoat ng mom ko yun. Hindi sinugarcoat ng mom ko na masama ang NPA. NPA ang pamilya natin, pero masama ang NPA. Magdasal ka, magbasa ka ng mga religious books, diyan ka mag-focus, huwag kang mag-NPA dahil masama ang NPA. Imagine that kind of, yung at 4 years old, mahirap na, alam mo, nagtataka sila eh, bakit lahat ng recruiters nagtataka sila. Lahat na ng kagaguhan, katarantaduhan to manipulate me, to radicalize me. Pinadala pa ako, Peter, sa Hacienda Luisita para magalit ako sa military, para magalit ako sa police, di ba? Ang hindi nila maintindihan, kasi data-driven ang brain ko eh. So, nung pumunta ako doon, syempre, tinrace ko, sino ba yung nag-request para doon sa assumption of jurisdiction order na inisyo ng Department of Labor and Employment, yung DOLE Secretary. Diba? Eh, na-trace ko na congressman pa nun eh, Deputy Speaker, congressman pa nun si Noynoy Aquino. So, na-trace ko na siya ang pumirma, siya ang nag-request for the AJ order. So, ang gusto nila, ang gusto ng papa ko, ang gusto ng mga CPP-NPA ko ng mga professors sa journalism, akala nila na pag nilagay nila ako sa Hacienda Luisita, magiging anti-government ako, magiging anti-military ako, magiging anti-PNP ako kasi makikita ko yung pagpatay sa farmers. Pero dahil data-driven ang utak ko, what I wanted to see was paper trail, di ba? Saan ang galing yung utos? Sino ang pumirma? Sino ang nag-request na pirmahan ng DOLE? Ganun ako mag-isip. So, as parents, you know, the best thing that you can do is to hone your children to also be data-driven. Huwag maging emotional. Kasi kung emotional ako, Peter, normal lang naman na umiyak, normal lang na magalit,
of course.
pero important na palakihin natin yung mga anak natin na hindi sila emotional. Kasi pag emotional ka, madali kang ma-manipulate na sasabihin, oh, ipaglaban mo yung mga mahihirap, ipaglaban mo yung mga farmers. Pero yung mga kunwaring naka-uniform ng police, kunwaring naka-uniform ng soldier, NPA naman yun. Sa tingin mo ba magsusuot ng uniform yung military, yung police, tapos may badge pa dyan na tapos mambubugbog sila ng basta-basta ng fisherman, magbubugbog sila ng mahirap, diba? Siyempre, logically, hindi nila gagawin yon kasi pwede silang ma-court martial, diba?
Yeah.
So, kailangan mag-isip ka na, teka lang, sundalo ba talaga to? PNP ba talaga to? Malamang nagko-costume lang to ng mga, hindi pala to uniform, costume. Kasi NPA sila so hindi sa uniform, di ba? Costume siya. Para silang nagko-cosplay. Kailangan yung mga ganitong bagay to the dear parents na nakikinig. Dapat alamin natin yung mga ganitong tactics, ganitong strategies at ikwento natin sa mga anak natin. Para bago pa sila ma-expose sa senior high school, bago pa sila ma-expose sa college, na dyan na nila gagawin yung mga pag-manipulate nila ng emotions at saka ng utak ng mga kabataan.
For the children to be more discerning, hindi ba?
Oo. Magiging discerning sila. Just trust them. Parang wag niyong isipin na masyadong mabigat. For example, there are people na baka sabihin nila na, masyadong mabigat tong crossing the red line, kaya ba to ng anak ko? Mas magaan na basahin ng anak ninyo yung crossing the red line. Mas magaan yon na basahin nila to, di ba? Than daanan nila. Di ba? Mas madali yun eh. Basahin na lang nila kaysa pagdaanan pa nila. Yun yung point nun. Di ba? So kung sa tingin nyo masyadong, kasi there will be people, Peter, that will say, masyadong dark, masyadong mabigat, kaya ba yan ng senior high school? Yes. Kasi lahat ng kinikwento ko dito happened since I was 3 years old. 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. Lahat ng hanggang lumaki na ako. So, kung kaya ko yung i-process yon at that age, kaya rin ng mga anak ninyo. Ang idea dito is hindi nila daanan. Diba?
Yeah.
Mabuti na basahin nila ang isang
malaman ang totoo.
libro. Oo, malaman nila ang totoo kaysa sa anuhin nila, yung kailangan daanan nila, wag na, 'di ba? Nilagay ko na dito eh. Ano ba yung mga tools na ginagamit nila, 'di ba? Kung ano yung mga strategies nila, ano yung mga tactics nila pang manipulate. Lahat nilagay ko na dito. So, ang purpose ba't ko sinulat dito, it's not because gusto kong pahiyain ang family ko. That's not the point. Meron yung mga communist, Peter, na nagsasabi na, sinabihan ako may lumapit sa akin dati. Sabi, so lumalaban ka lang kasi ni-rape ka ng papa mo. Sinabihan ako ng isang communist na infiltrator.
But isn't that a valid reason as well?
But you know what I told him? You know what I told this communist termite? Sabi ko sa kanya, with all due respect, sir, sabi ko sa kanya, I did not publish this book because I was raped by my dad. Walang anak, walang rape survivor na gustong humarap publicly about rape. Kita mo nga yung mga humaharap sa court, nagpatakip ng muka, nagtatago, nagpapablur, sabi ko, yun ang common na nangyayari. But sabi ko, I did not come out because of the rape. No, I only explained the rape because it's a real tool for radicalization. Yes. Pero sabi ko, it's not the reason. I kept quiet for more than 30 years. I kept quiet. And I was trying to live as normal a life as I could possibly have. I was trying to, get married. I was trying to move to another country. And is the book available in EU? Meron po sila via DHL po, no? So, ang reality is that it's been difficult for me. Sabi ko dun sa communist naman na to. Walang rape victim na proud na ni-rape siya. Diba, ano ka tanga? Sabi ko sa kanya, walang bata na magiging proud sa matter na yan. And in the 30 years na nagsa-therapy ako in the last decade, in the 30 years na yan, hindi naman ako, Peter, friends tayo, nasa media tayo, did I ever tell you that my father was raping me? Di ba hindi?
No, you did
not. Yeah, it was before I came out publicly, when my mom was tortured, when my mom was murdered. When I came out publicly, that was the driving force. The fact that my mother was tortured, my mother was murdered, and that lahat ng, alam mo yung, bakit ba ako tumahimik? Tumahimik ako because I wanted, to give my brother, my mother, yung chance to save face. Alam mo yung culture ng Asians na you want your family, your loved ones to save face. Kahit na part sila sa pag-perpetrate ng abuse sa akin kasi kinakampihan nila yung rapist dahil lang powerful siya, di ba?
Yeah.
But despite that, I am still a Filipino and I will still want to protect their name and I will still want to shield them, di ba? Shield them from the shame of whatever ugly truth there is happening at home, di ba? Ang sa akin lang is that, kung nandun na sa point na, we're not talking about, sabi ko dun sa communist termite na to, sabi ko, I'm not talking about rape. Sabi ko, are you dumb? Sabi ko, I'm talking about terrorism. I'm talking about hundreds, thousands of children who are actually living in terror in their own homes. Yeah. Diba? Imagine, Peter, kung hindi ako kumawala sa family ko, kung hindi ako nag-cut ties sa family ko, bago nagkaroon ng COVID-19, Kasi nagkatay sa kanila 2013 pa eh. Eh what if yung mga ibang anak ng mga CPP-NPA, NDF, kasi hindi naman sila CPP-NPA, NDF, di ba? Gusto nilang lumaban. Tapos ngayon, COVID-19. Tapos trapped sila, di ba? Kasi they're forced to stay at home, di ba? They're forced to stay at home with rapists, with murder. Sa tingin mo ba, pag wala sila yun yung problema sa murder eh, yun yung problema sa killing. Nakaka-addict pumatay. Yun yung reality. Once people are accustomed to killing, the only hard part is to kill your first target. After your first target, madali nang pumatay ng sunod-sunod. Because the moment na makapatay ka ng sunod-sunod, nawawala yung guilt. Nawawala yung moral na dilemma.
It becomes a habit.
It becomes a habit. It's really like an addiction. That's why, and sabi ko nga, parang kailangan talaga sa Philippines na alam mo yon, magkaroon tayo ng konkreto na deradicalization program. Ang deradicalization program, kumbaga, imagine yung prison natin sa Palawan, yung magandang prison doon, like Iwahig, no? A beautiful prison like that, na pwede mong gawing center for preventing and countering violent extremism, na pwede mo siyang lagyan ng deradicalization program. Kasi syempre, yung mga CPP-NPA, NDF na may mga pinatay, meron talaga silang mga nilibing tinorture, nilibing ng buhay, meron silang mga ni-rape. Of course, they also have to, magsusurrender sila sa government. Pag surrender nila sa government, kailangan they also pay for their crime. Kailangan, kung halimbawa ilalagay mo sila sa prison, na yung prison na like Iwahig, no? Yung Iwahig is like
where
a
they
paradise.
can have proper rehabilitation.
Yes,
because ladies and gentlemen, Drei, you will agree with me when we say that being imprisoned is not supposed to make you worse as a human being. It's supposed to rehabilitate you. That's why what we have here dyan sa Bilibid Prison, I think it's being renovated now. But all these criminals need rehabilitation. If we put them in a place that is miserable, dirty, dingy, dark, and smelly, how can they rehabilitate themselves, right?
Exactly. That's a very good point, Peter. Kasi the reality is we need to build humane prisons, 'di ba?
Yes.
Hindi pwede na yung prisons natin living hell on earth. Na kesyo they are being imprisoned, it's a living hell on earth. Contrary to the point, kasi marami sa mga nagiging criminals already had bad childhoods, 'di ba? Marami sa kanila na they were pushed into committing all those crimes. But important talaga na, for example, and this is my message also to the NTF-LCAC, kailangan yung whole of nation approach should definitely involve yung mga jail wardens natin na mag-initiate ng NTF-LCAC na yung mga jail wardens will be activated as a resource, no, na sila mismo mag-create sila ng proposals to be funded by the national government para magkaroon tayo ng magagandang prison. More like Iwahig of Palawan. Kasi sobrang maganda yung Iwahig Palawan. Marirehabilitate yung soul mo, marirehabilitate yung heart mo, and then mafe-feel mo na kahit na nandun ka sa prison, that the community cares about you. So once natapos na yung pag-serve mo ng time in prison, you're not out to kill everybody. Di ba? No.
Baga wala ka ng vindictive heart.
Oo, wala ka ng vindictive heart. Yun yung gusto nating gawin, 'di ba? Kasi hindi pwede na, for example, mag-i-clip, magsusurrender sila, tapos may i-clip. Ang problema kasi diyan, Peter, magiging incentivized platform siya for corruption. Bakit? Merong mga cases na may mga cases, documented cases na may bata pinaakyat ng bundok for 8 days tapos pinasurrender para lang makaklaim siya ng e-clip. Tapos inalaw. 8 days lang siya sa bundok. So, parang syempre may mga matagal nang nasa bundok, 'di ba, na talagang marami na silang mga napatay na sa enkwentro na pulis, na military, marami na silang napatay na mga farmers na ayaw magbayad ng rev tax. Marami na silang mga nasunog na mga bus drivers, truck drivers dahil sinusunog nila alive yung mga bus drivers at conductors, ha? Hindi lang yan na yung bus lang ang sinusunog nila. So, itong mga reality na ito, kailangan syempre, pag nag-surrender ka, di ba, part ng surrender mo is, para ma-incentivize sila to surrender, kailangan alam nila na merong safe na prison, like yung sa Iwahin, na maganda. Kasi ito rin alam mo kung anong kailangan isipin to ng NTSL Peter. Kung ako yung surrenderer, I will worry about my security. Kasi magsusurrender ako, di ba? Tapos mag-change yung administration. I want to be secured, di ba? If there is like something like a Center for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism, tapos meron siyang de-radicalization component, tapos maganda siya na prison system katulad nung sa Iwahig na alam mo yon, merong river, merong alam mo yon, magfa-farming tayo, etc. Pero prison system siya.
Prison system pa rin, oo.
Yeah, prison system siya. Why?
Kasi sa prison system, lahat ng galaw mo dinumero hindi ba?
Yes. Ang important doon, sa prison system na ganun, ang important doon is first protected ka. Hindi ka basta-bastang mapapatay, di ba?
Yeah.
At the same time, you're serving your time in prison. Kasi you have to, ito ang sa akin, to all the CPP-NPA na listening, na mga surrenderers, no? Siyempre, all the crimes that had been committed, na kahit, halimbawa, vitiated yung consent, kasi from the time you were a teenager to a young adult, you were only receiving orders from the Communist Party, from the New People's Army. Pero, syempre, you have to also pay for those crimes. And ako personally, never mind yung kung ano lang yung mangyayari in this lifetime, in the afterlife. I'm talking about the afterlife. Na, in the afterlife, hindi ka na mapupunta sa hell. Hindi ka na mapupunta sa yun yung, alam mo yung parang sinasabi ko sa mga tao, hindi ako hateful sa papa ko, sa mama ko, hindi. Why am I fighting? Why am I exposing my clan? Kasi gusto ko na mapagbayaran nila yung mga crimes nila. Ayoko na yung, alam mo yung dahil covert operatives, tapos alam mo yon, invisible siya na supremo. So, alam mo yun, ang dami na lang namatay, ang daming nag-grieve na families, tapos wala siyang di ba? Wala siyang, he will never pay for his crime. Actually, it's because I love my dad that I want for him to suffer the consequences of all his atrocities. I want him to suffer the punishment now, in this lifetime. Para, alam mo yun, to spare him, kasi sabihin na natin, Peter, hindi sila naniniwala kay God. Yung totoong atheist sila. They don't believe in the afterlife. Okay, granted. But, ako, because I believe in God, I believe that there's an afterlife. And all the more, after my mom was murdered, all the more that I can even say na, I feel the divine intervention. Kasi, Peter, hindi simple na for me to stay alive from 2017 to now. Hindi simple for me to stay alive. So, the fact that I'm still alive, maraming mga nangyaring interventions that even for myself, alam mo na sa totoo lang, na sobrang na-affected ako nung pag-murder kay Keith Absalon, kay Nolven Absalon. It was so triggering for my PTSD. It was so triggering. Why? Because a part of me is like, why was I able to stay alive? How come they died? Alam mo yung ganung yung feeling na bakit ako buhay sila namatay, 'di ba? So, meron akong ganung masakit for me every time somebody dies in the hands of the CPP-NPA. Masakit kasi lumalaban na nga ako, gusto ko mag-stop na yung violence. I exposed my dad, I exposed my family, knowing na kapalit nun buhay ko. But why do I willingly do that? I do that kasi I'd rather die. So I'm careful. I do my best to stay alive because I want to outlive all of them. But if I should die, I would rather die than mas marami pang mga innocent people na mamatay. Diba? That's why I am speaking up. That's why I wrote this book. That's why, I always use social media as a platform kasi Peter, talagang social media ang pinaka-weapon natin eh. Kasi social media lang this is the first time in history that people like us, finally have a voice na hindi tayo nafi-filter ng mainstream media, 'di ba? Kasi yun yung power ng social media eh. Kaya bakit hindi nila masira-sira si President Duterte? Di ba? Because of social media. Because
Precisely.
normal citizens, normal law-abiding citizens will always have their voice heard on the
Heard.
different platforms of Twitter, of Facebook, in TikTok, 'di ba? Si Crisette
Mhm.
is so funny sa TikTok niya,
I know, I
and
know.
yeah, si Jam Magno, marami silang
Jamagno,
mga
yeah.
fans sa
The
sa
TikTok
TikTok
stars.
nila.
Yeah.
Yeah, mga TikTok stars, and parang this is because social media is really something that is changing the way that we are able to debunk the false narratives of the communist terrorists all over the country, 'di ba? Kasi ang yung Makabayan block, for example, 'di ba?
Mm-mm.
Talagang deny pa sila ng deny na may link sila sa NPA. Eh, obvious naman ng mga CPP-NPA sila, 'di ba?
Yeah.
Kamatayan block na dapat ang tawag diyan. So, it's really the reality that we have for so long we have been intimidated into silence, and what I want to impart, to the parents, to the children who are listening right now, is that yung silence na, yung sinabi mo, Peter, kanina, na sometimes we keep quiet kasi hindi naman tayo affected. Di ba? Yung parang, as long as hindi pa tayo yung victim, ang
Okay ka.
kadalasan, parang, oo, parang ano ka pa yung medyo, um,
You
hindi
don't
ka naman
care.
talaga,
You don't care.
oh, like
Diba?
yung apathy or indifference na kasi
Yeah.
hindi ka naman parang sasabihin mo masama ba talaga si PPNP, ba di naman nila ako sinasaktan. So alam mo yung ganong mindset, kahit yun yung doon mo makikita na yung communist terrorist at saka yung fascist mindset is very similar. Yung why is it very similar? Kasi tingnan mo yung nangyari sa 6 million Jews that were slaughtered, 'di ba, by the
Yeah.
Nazis. The Germans, the non-Jewish Germans, they all thought, okay lang naman kasi hindi naman kami ang pinapatay ni Hitler. 'Di ba? Hindi naman
Yeah.
kasi hindi naman kami Hudyo, 'di ba? So okay lang na I can go back home, I
Yeah.
can be a father, a husband, and it's fine. Kasi after nila mag-torture, after nila pumatay ng mga Hudyo, uuwi sila, and it's like a different world. Na, di
Yeah.
ba,
It's
hindi
like they
sila
go back to
affected.
their own life where they are
Oo.
comfortable and safe.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a fragmentation, 'di ba, of the psyche. So
Yeah.
ang nangyayari dito is that in the Philippines, yung mga hindi affected or hindi pa affected ng CPP-NPA atrocities, CPP-NPA-NDF atrocities, ang masasabi ko lang is that dalawa lang yan eh. Either nagbe-benefit ka sa system, di ba? First, nagbe-benefit ka sa system ng CPP, NPA, NDF at hindi mo naiintindihan yung sinasabi ni Kaamihan earlier na nagkakaintindihan kayo ngayon pero later papatayin ka rin ng CPP. Di ba? Yung akala mo, magkakampi kayo ngayon pero later, ikaw din yung papatayin. Ngayon lang
Ngayon lang kayo okay.
Ngayon lang kayo okay, pero later papatayin din kayo. So gumising kayo dahil, alam mo yon, it's just a matter of time. Yun yung first, no? Those who are able to get financial incentives, di ba? So, financial incentives, academic scholarships, career opportunities that are given to them because of the CPP-NPA-NDF network. So, ito yung first category. The second category are those na ano talaga, as in, naririnig na nila sa news na may CPP-NPA-NDF na communist terrorists. Pero since hindi naman sila ang victim, hindi pa rin sila affected. Diba? Parang, may professor ako sa UP, alam ko NPA yun eh, alam ko CPP yun. Mabait naman siya, magaling naman siya na professor. Alam mo yung maraming ganyang agrason. Up to now, maraming ganyang si PP? Oo, si PP naman talaga siya, pero mabait naman siya sa akin. O, mabait siya sa'yo, pero marami na siyang pinatay.
Oo. Ito, Drei, mapakita ko lang sa'yo kaninang umaga kasi na uminit ang ulo ko dito eh. When Kaki Pangilinan, yung anak ni Kiko Pangilinan at Sharon Conera, came out with this statement. Lilibeth, uh, acts of violence are illegal, yes, but there's plenty of that on both the right and left. Communism is just an ideology protected by freedom of beliefs. To target communists and socialist communists thought specifically is blatant discrimination. Can you imagine the audacity of
Mm.
this girl? That she, kanina sinagot ko yan, Drea, that I was fuming mad and I really
Mm.
was very harsh answering dun sa sinagot ko siya sa Twitter. Because I said, hindi mo naiintindihan ang sinabi mo. Kilala mo
Mm.
si Kate Absalon? Sabi kong ganyan.
Mm.
I mean, can you imagine what this okay, okay ang buhay niyan eh. Mayamang
Mm.
ka eh. Tapos
Yes.
tinatawag mo lang yan na ideology lang yan na
Yeah.
supposed to be
Yeah.
protected by right of belief. Do you
Mm.
really understand what you're saying here? Hindi ba, Dre? I mean, the
I,
ignorance is
yes.
so,
Kasi
I
kasi
could not.
yan yung problem, no, na they would even say na ano lang naman, yung mga communists, these are just parang political prisoners, political dissidents. Alam mo yung ano nila yan eh, it's part of the false narratives that they are perpetrating. Ang sa akin
Yeah.
simple lang, if Kaki Pangilinan by any chance will be listening to this show, um, you know, you have to realize that you are being used as a tool. You are being used as just like any other pawn. You are a pawn of the Communist Party. By saying what you're saying, by writing what you are writing, you are a pawn of the Communist Party. But let me tell you, to Kaki Pangilinan, that by all means, lahat ng mga pinagsasabi mo, that's all bullshit. Because what do you have to say to people like me? What do you have to say to real victims, real survivors of terror like me, na ano kami, guni-guni lang kami, we're just a figment of everyone's imagination, na people like Relisa Lucena who nearly lost her daughter AJ, people like Ka
Yeah.
Amihan, who is actually fighting for the rights of women who have been raped by other cadre. So, ako, na pareho mama at papa ko, tita ko, si Ka Jojo, lahat ng mga CPP-NPA. Keso hindi ako CPP-NPA, papapatay ako dahil sasabihin nila na counter-revolutionary ako, na therefore I deserve to die kasi hindi ako komunista, dahil I have the audacity to condemn the CPP-NPA-NDF. Di ba? Ngayon pa ako matatakot. Sa tingin nyo, simple mag-survive ng poisoning? Sa tingin nyo, madali, na hit and run pa ako niyan. Yung hit and run, kunwari hit and run, pero obvious naman na hindi naman yung accident na hit and run. There were so many occasions that I should have been dead that I don't even understand, Peter, why hindi ako namatay.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I know na hindi siya totoong hit and run, kasi kung totoong hit and run yun, Peter, dapat pina-hospital ako ng mama at papa ko, di ba?
Yeah.
I was not even brought to the hospital. Kinuha nila ako after the poisoning, tapos hinit and run ako doon sa Cambodia. Pagdala sa akin sa Cambodia, hinit and run ako doon. Kasi hindi ako dinala sa hospital. Do you think it was an accident? Of course not. That was when they were teaching me to keep quiet.
Yeah.
Diba? So tumahimik ka or you die. Diba? Laban ka pa ng laban dyan.
Oo. Drei, I would just like to end our interview by congratulating you, your tenacity, your iba. Drei, you just don't know, after reading this book, I really insisted to my executive producers, I want to have you part of the series that we are doing about educating people about CPP-NPA. Drei, any last words to the world about what you just want to tell them?
First of all, to the mainstream media.
Mainstream media, yes.
Yeah, to the mainstream media who, continue to allow themselves to be either used deliberately or to be intimidated by the CPP-NPA, NDF communist terrorists so as to continuously sabotage the different efforts of the NTFL-CAC. Alam nyo, kahit may financial incentives pa yung mga pinagagawa ninyo, kahit magkano pa ang nakukuha nyong lagay sa mga CPP-NPA, NDF, so that you will come out with all these lies in mainstream media, merong afterlife. Whether you believe it or you don't believe it, merong afterlife. And in the afterlife, doon tayo lahat magkakabayaran. And yung ginagawa ninyo na akala ninyo kasi since hindi kayo yung killers, kasi hindi kayo yung rapists, kasi hindi kayo yung bombers, kasi hindi kayo yung arsonists, nasa tingin nyo, messengers lang kayo, na nasa media lang kayo. No. Kasi dapat nakita ninyo, yung mga nasa mainstream media, na kasama kayo sa crime. Because you, in mainstream media, who are, in perpetrating the crimes of the CPP-NPA, NDF, by protecting them, by lying for them, by spreading all their deceptions, their lies through TV, through internet, yung mga websites ng Rappler, websites ng ABS-CBN, websites ng GMA, lahat, pati yung Manila Bulletin, Star, lahat ng mga Inquirer, lahat ng mga newspapers na talagang napasukan na ng mga anay, napasukan na ng mga communist termites. Pero sa tingin niyo, kasi hindi kayo yung killer, sa tingin niyo innocent kayo, hindi kayo innocent. Kasama kayo sa pag-perpetrate ng crimes and therefore equally guilty. Tama si Barikusa?
Yeah, tama, Barikusa. Equally guilty.
Equally guilty. So, that is my message for those in the mainstream media. And for those in the Department of Education, alam nyo kung sino kayo. Alam kong alam nyo na ni-report ko na kayo na kung sino-sino kayong mga nasa DepEd na mga communist termites. Ang masasabi ko rin sa inyo, naghihintay ang hell sa inyo. Kasi hindi naman kayo takot sa mapunta sa prison, hindi naman kayo takot na makulong. Kasi so far, na makonvict. Wala pa nga tayo, alam mo Peter, wala pa tayong terrorism financing convictions in the Philippines. Kaya tayo nag-gray list recently. Nag-gray list tayo ng FATF, ang Philippines, kasi wala pa tayong convictions. Ang daming bombing, ang daming arson, ang daming mga pinatay ng terrorist, tapos walang terrorism financing conviction. Yun ang reason ba tayo nag-gray list. Kasi hindi naman mangyayari lahat ng mga karumal-dumal na krimen na yan kung walang funding na constantly pumapasok. So, kasama sa kailangang ma-reform, internal na malinis at saka ma-reform, is the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas at saka yung AMLAC ng Philippines. Kasi hindi naman papasok ang terrorism financing for the last more than 5 decades. No? We're talking about half a century. Hindi naman yan papasok ng milyones ng ilang kada buwan, no? We're talking of millions of dollars. So, ang pera na yan, kung hindi yan nakakapasok ng Philippines, hindi rin magkakaroon ng incentive ang mga CPP-NPA, NDF para pumatay, para mag-rally. Yung mga rally-rally na yan, akala mo, yan, yung sa mga perspective ni Kaki Pangilinan, sa tingin niya, activism lang yan. No. Those rallies are used to stage all the different, yung mga labor unions, na pumapatay din yung mga CPP-NPA, NDF na member ng labor union. Na para magsara yung mga trabaho sa Philippines, di ba? Kasi pag nagsara yung mga trabaho, magagalit yung mga tao kasi wala silang trabaho.
Yes.
Pag nagalit yung mga tao, magagalit sila sa gobyerno. So it's a cycle, It's not harmless activism when they go out into the streets and with these labor unions. May mga tama silang pinaglalaban, pero lahat yan pwedeng masettle ng proper negotiation, not through violence. Kasi yung every time na rally sila ng rally, tapos nagsasara yung trabaho, yung mga from the companies that are the factories na nagsara na. Marami na yan, hundreds na nagsara. Kaya nga ang problema ng Philippines ngayon, Peter, OFW dependent tayo, di ba? We are a country that relies on OFWs. And again, I wrote the Crossing the Red Line because I also want for the parents, especially the OFWs, the 10 million OFWs. I want the OFWs to understand that your absence in the life of your children in the Philippines makes them vulnerable to recruitment by the CPP-NPA and NDF. The time that my father was raping me, hindi naman na wala ang nanay ko sa Pilipinas. Nasa Pilipinas siya, pero kung saan pati siya ng Pilipinas pupunta. Later on, nung 17 na ako, nasa Cambodia na siya, di mas lalo, kasi wala na yung nanay ko. Di ba? So, imagine niyo yung absence ninyo, whether kanino ba naiwan ng bata, sa lolo, lola, sa uncle, hindi mo na mababantayan. Kasi paano kung may uncle, may auntie, or may lolo, lola na CPP-NPA, di ba? Paano mo mababantayan yung anak mo na hindi sumama kung mismo ang mga magulang na kumaga secondary parents, no, yung mga guardians na tumatayo dahil habang OFW kayo, nagtatrabaho kayo sa ibang bansa, aanhin natin yung pera na nanggagaling, di ba, ng pagtrabaho sa ibang bansa, kung sira naman yung pamilya natin na gusto natin itaguyod sa Pilipinas. Di ba? So, for me, yung Crossing the Red Line is really, it's a book that I want as many Filipinos to be able to read because it will allow the young people to really see what are the tactics, what are the strategies for manipulation, for recruitment. Pag naintindihan nyo lahat ng mga strategies na yan, which I already outlined in the book, no? Hindi na kayo basta-basta mauuto. Kung meron kayong mga classmates, meron kayong mga friends, meron kayong mga peers na recruit, bigyan nyo sila ng ganitong libro. Bigyan nyo sila ng libro, lagyan nyo ng dedication, sabihin nyo na sana hindi mangyari ito sa pamilya ninyo. Sana hindi ganito maging kapalaran ng anak ninyo. Sana, you personalize your message, but this book will make it possible. Why? Because there are so many narratives that are conflicting. Alam mo yan, na parang sasabihin nila na ang NTFL ka kung ang gobyerno nagsisinungaling. Anong gusto niyong resource? Anak na ako ng communist. So what I'm saying is, even to Kaki Pangilinan, akala mo you're defending communists? No, there are thousands of children like me. And that's why I wrote this book, because I don't want those other children to suffer in silence. Diba, mamamatay na lang, pinatay, tapos papalabasin, nag-suicide. Pinatay, tapos papalabasin, aksidente. Diba? Kaso, sa totoo, nilason, sa totoo, sinagasaan, sa totoo, papalabasin pa nila na halimbawa, papalabasin nila, na-COVID. Alam mo, lahat na lang ng rason.
Lahat,
gagawin,
lahat.
Para lang, so the thing there is, the suffering is there. And just because hindi kayo yung victim, for the greater public na hindi naman, you are not the victims, you are not the direct victims of the CPP-NPA and NDF, your indifference, your apathy will someday backfire. Because you don't know na, for example, yung sa mga mayayaman na families, sa tingin nyo, yung mga mahihirap lang ang nire-recruit ng CPP-NPA and NDF? No. They partner with very, very big names, with the oligarchs. Why? Because they have, apart from functioning as the private militia of the oligarchs, they also marry into yung mga magagandang mga dilag. No? And ito, message ko to sa mga, all the generals, all the colonels, yung mga high-ranking ng police at ng military. Be faithful to your wives. Be faithful to your children, to your family. Yung mga kabit ninyo, yung mga kirida ninyo, na sa tingin nyo, naka-jackpot kayo kasi wow, ang bata, wow, Miss Earth siya, wow, Miss Universe siya. Yan din ang mag-arsenic sa inyo. Yan din ang lalasin sa inyo pag hindi na kayo mamanipulate. So get rid of your whatever, mga kirida, mga kabit, mga CPP yan. Kasi gusto ng mga CPP sirain ang mga pamilya. Yun naman ang mission ng communists, to destroy the family. So, yung mga kabit is a very, very old tool for destroying families. So, pag nasira na yung mga pamilya ninyo, sa tingin nyo ba yung mga anak ninyo hindi kukunin ng CPP-NPA? Siyempre kukunin. Sasabihin ng CPP-NPA, yung papa mo may kabit, syempre alam nila sino yung kabit kasi yung kabit CPP-NPA din. Tapos makukuha nila yung anak, 'di ba? Ng military, makukuha nila yung anak ng police. Yun yung and by stating these facts, hindi naman natin sinasabi na lahat ng nasa PNP or nasa AFP ganyan na nangyari. Of course not. Mas marami pa rin yung mga may integrity, 'di ba?
Yes.
Pero ang problema diyan is that syempre, yung kumaga sa anay, 'di ba? Makapasok lang yung anay, kahit isa, dalawang anay, madali nang tibagin yung
It can destroy a
hanggang
whole
solid.
house.
Oo, it can destroy an entire house kahit na magsimula lang yun sa isa or dalawang anay.
Yeah.
So that is my plea, for all of us to use the social media, to read as many books as we can na makikita natin kung ano yung truth. Kasi syempre, alam niyo, mahirap mag-publish ng libro, sa totoo lang. Mahirap lahat ng mga libro na mga nakikita ninyo for so long, yung like yung sinabi ko kanina, yung conjugal dictatorship. Syempre, sinand ng Communist Party yun, di ba? So, like what you said, Peter, na sana nga, like yung efforts na ganito, sana supportahan din ng government. Because the narratives that come from non-communists who are victims of their own communist terrorist family members is also something that is equally compelling. Bakit?
Yes.
Kasi hindi ako criminal eh. Peter, yun yung difference. The fact na hindi ako pumatay, hindi ako ng rape, hindi ako ng sunog, I have no ulterior motive to lie. I have no ulterior motive to manipulate people in the government to say this, that, no. Kasi wala naman akong public na posisyon, wala akong makukuha, wala akong e-clip na makukuha by writing this book, by publishing this book na to fight for the justice of my mother, for my justice, for the justice of all the other children who are suffering. Walang e-clip na kapalito. So yun yung sinasabi ko na you check your sources. You check the motivation. You check kung may ulterior motive ba yung tao o wala. Kasi wala akong makukuha dito. Diba? Yung for me to come out, nakukuha ko dito death threats. Pero, never mind. Dati pa nila yung ginagawa. Pero ang point ko lang is, the truth is already out there. We have a very good president. President Duterte has started this yung totoong revolution.
The real fight.
Yeah, the real fight, the real revolution, which is starting from within. Kita mo, at ito lang ang last ko na gusto lang i-highlight. And, big congratulations to Hidilyn Diaz and all the different athletes na hopefully mas marami pa tayong maging gold, na coming from mga Mindanao na athletes. Kita niyo yung difference? Ngayon na ang president natin is si President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, yung support na binuhos niya, hindi lang sa sports, pero yung pera, yung funds na binuhos niya sa NTF-LCAC, kung aaralin yan academically, it has a direct correlation kung bakit nakaka-gold na tayo ngayon sa Olympics. Bakit? Kasi yung mga malalakas, matatalino at malalakas, na dating kinukuha ng NPA para lang mamatay sa mga kabundukan, ngayon, napafund na sila ng government para mag-sports. Actually, kung buhay lang si Keith Absalon, alam mo yun, MVP yun eh. Kasama yun sa mga pwedeng manalo sa...
Meron ng alternative ang kabataan. Meron na silang pwedeng puntahan. And this winning in the Olympic is a big, big chance for the children na eto pwede niyong gawin to. And be multi-millionaires.
Yes. Imagine mo, magbuhat-buhat ka dyan. Di ngayon, yung mga bata, gagawa na sila ng chores para, alam mo yun, tutulong na sila sa mama at papa nila dahil magbubuhat na sila like Hidilyn Diaz. The reality is that the government, the Philippine government before, dahil nga ang problema natin before President Duterte, grabe yung power ng CPP-NPA, NDF. Kaya nga, ang kakapal lang mukha nila hanggang ngayon. Pero the fact that we are united, when all of us stay united and we are vocal and we use our platforms, our social media, to get the message out there, then kita mo yung effect nun. May trickle effect yan eh, na ngayon, ang dami grabe yung ang daming kabataan na inspired na mag-weightlifting, taekwondo, mag-judo,
Mag-tennis,
mag-swimming,
mag-golf, what
mag-tennis.
have you.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, even yung sa golf, 'di ba?
Yeah.
Recently, meron din tayong record ngayon sa golf. So, all these things, yung sports kasi will only advance kapag alam mo yon, yung the best and brightest, the most athletic are not being sent to die in the mountains.
Yeah.
Instead, they are playing sports, di ba? That can bring pride to the nation, that can also create a healthier population. Kasi syempre, ano na yun, cream of the crop na yan si Hideline Diaz.
Yeah.
Pero marami ding mga in training, di ba? So ito yung mga kabataan na dati, kinuha na sila ng CPP, pero under President Duterte, under the NTF-LCAC, di ba? With the joint na yung whole of nation approach, katulad ng ginagawa natin ngayon, Peter. Lahat ito, nagsusnowball effect yan. At akala lang natin nakakatakot. Nakakatakot lang sa umpisa, pero pag nag-snowball effect na yan, para na yan kaya nga sila galit na galit ngayon kasi weekend na sila. Nararamdaman na nila na bilang na yung araw nila. So, yun yung reality na, alam mo yun, if we can replicate all the good things that have been done by President Duterte's administration and the NTF-LCAC under his administration, and we can continue this under the 2022, 2028, etc. na mga administrations, then there will be hope for the country. Kahit na 91 years na ang communism, kasama yung PKP 1930, 91 years na. Kung CPP-NPA lang, 53 years pa lang ang CPP-NPA. But technically, we're speaking of over half a century to almost a century. Ganun na katagal ang communism. Pero we have to remember that kahit gano'n na yan katagal, walang social media noon. Walang social media noon that can expose all their dirt, that can expose all their shit, all their atrocities, all their heinous crimes. Ngayon meron na. And there is hope, you know, with when there are people like si Kaamihan who is so brilliant and ngayon nagagamit niya, na-redirect niya yung path niya, no? And she is able to redirect her path, and she's able to help other surrenderers. Ito yung time, golden age to, na we are not celebrating the death of other Filipinos. Kaya nga yung idea natin, Peter, na magagandang prison system, di ba? That dun sa prison system na yon, meron talagang rehabilitation for de-radicalization. Ang important doon is safe kasi sila. Hindi sila malalapitan ng Communist Party, hindi sila malalapitan ng SPARU. Kasi yung security na ipoprovide mo within that haven, di ba? Marirehabilitate sila. Lahat ng kung ano yung pagkukulang ng gobyerno, pagkukulang ng pamilya nila, pagkukulang ng community nila that drove them to radicalization. Yes, will be addressed in a very, yung kumaga humane na prison system. Pero kailangan, maipakita natin na meron pa ring repercussions, meron pa ring consequences. To murder somebody, to commit rape, to commit arson that kills people, that does not only destroy property but actually kills people. Because it's a problem with fire. Indiscriminate yung pwedeng mamatay basta fire, di ba? So, all these things, we have to see that there is a consequence. We need to create a generation that is willing to have the moral conviction that, sige, I will serve my time. For example, 5 years or 10 years in prison. Pero that entire time, you're getting your college degree, you're getting your high school, your college degree, your master's, your PhD in prison. Na wala kang disturbances. But the government will provide that, na nandun ka, and you're serving your time. So nobody can say na, bakit ang mga terorista na yan? Kasi yan ang sinasabi ng Abu Sayyaf, Peter. Yan ang sinasabi ng MILF, MNLF. Bakit ang CPP hindi kinukulong? Ba't kami lang? May ganung question So kung i-address natin yung question na yun na, sige, lahat kayo, eto, meron tayong...
Dapat walang discrimination sa terorista. CPP,
dapat wala.
MNF, Abu Sayyaf, you have to offer them the same return package, kumbaga.
Yes.
Oo.
Hindi pwede na may special treatment ang mga
Yes,
communist
yes.
terrorists. Kasi alam mo, yung bakit nagwawala yung Abu Sayyaf, bakit nagwawala yung mga Jamaya Islamiyya, yung ISIS ng Southeast Asia, ba't nagwawala? Nagwawala sila kasi madali nilang ma-radicalize yung isip ng mga members nila. Kasi sasabihin nila, o tingnan nyo, pag CPP may i-clip kayo, wala. Pag may double standard kasi, nagagamit yan to radicalize the Abu Sayyaf, nagagamit yan to radicalize the MNLF, the MILF, the BISF, di ba? So, by having a justice system, alam naman natin na kailangan talaga nating ayusin ang justice system kasi ang daming National Democratic Front na lawyers, di ba, na nakakaupo sila dyan, nagiging justice sila, kasi National Democratic Front ang support base nila. So, kailangan talaga ng internal reform, even in the justice system. So, with all this, no, I'm hoping na for those who are asking kanina saan makukuha yung itong crossing the red line, you can go to Shopee. Meron sila nito sa Shopee. Type nyo lang crossing the red line, lalabas na yun sa Shopee na platform. Meron din sa website www.dreitoledo.com. So just my name, DREI, Toledo.com. And then you can place your orders there. Yung Shopee is for yung sa buong Philippines. Tapos kung nasa EU kayo or nasa ibang bansa kayo, they also ship to other countries via DHL, via LBC, other So hopefully magkaroon ng translation na in Filipino, and yun nga, sana mapondohan nga ng government na lahat ng mga kabataan mabigyan ng kopya kasi alam ko na medyo mahal siya, pero kasi mahal din talaga yung printing.
Mahal talaga printing, and the material is not just paper, it's glossy paper. So
yes, actually pinili ko talaga na gano'n kasi gusto ko yung transfer of hands na maraming makabasa, na alam mo yun, high quality talaga siya. Mas maraming makabasa. So thank you so much, Peter, for
thank you so much, Drei. This episode is, I don't know if this will conclude our series in CPP-NPA NDF education to really somehow magkaroon na ng eradication dyan sa problema natin na yan. Ladies and gentlemen, Drei Toledo, a survivor, a fighter, a journalist, author. Thank you so much for just being alive, Drei. Thank you so much.
Yung sa Amazon po na question, sana po magkaroon na po sa Amazon. Sana po. So kung meron pong may Amazon account, sana po.
Thank you, Drei. Thank you so much. Thank you. At mag-ingat ka lagi.
Yes. Parati naman. Sa mga survivors dyan, always remember, don't be a martyr. Strive to outlive all the bad people and then be happy. Huwag kayong maging full of hatred, huwag kayong maging full of anger. Kasi pag, alam mo yon, papangit tayo pag gano'n. Kailangan outlive them and then take care of yourself. Be healthy and then be happy. Yun po. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, Drei Toledo. And please get a copy of her book if you can. www.dreitoledo.com, and you can get a copy of Crossing the Red Line. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to give a quote from Dr. Leo Navarro. Ito po yung binanggit namin, ang ama ng pumanaw na si Tricia Navarro. Para sa mga kabataan, put all your youthful energy into your studies and let your family and God be the center of your life. Napakagandang message po. Mag-ingat po tayong lahat sa panlilinlang sa atin ng CPP-NPA because they are everywhere. The danger that they're putting our children to, the endangering na masisira ang pamilya, mawawara ka mga pangarap, mga iiyak na mga magulang, mga batang mawawala ng kinabukasan, paulit-ulit po natin yung uulit-ulitin sa inyo. Alagaan po ninyo at bantayan ang inyong mga sarili, mga kabataan, mga magulang. And to those people like Kaki Pangilinan, please try to understand what you are saying because, darling, having this problem is not just an ideology that is being protected by right to believe in something. This is terrorist insurgency and this is serious. Take note of that. At para po sa ating lahat, iisa lang ang ating bayan na dapat alagaan. Kaya't bago ang ano paman, isipin natin ang mga kabataan, bago ang sarili, Pilipinas muna. Magandang gabi po.